Okay, this is episode 6 of OverSight, and I'm the usual host Thorin, usual co-host Monte Cristo, and our guest for this episode, it's another episode of The Guest, is going to be Bishop, and I am instructed by the legal department to refer to him as the trial coach for Cloud9. I didn't say he's the coach, I didn't make any other statement, I just said he's the trial coach. He's on trial, and we will see whether in fact he is found guilty or not. So, Bishop, hello. How are you doing?
Hello, Thorin. Hello, Monte. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm doing great. How about you guys?
Okay, that's the end of the small talk, right? We don't do small talk on the show. I've actually never even asked someone how they've done in real life. Never mind that. I don't think I've ever asked Monty how he's doing, for example. But I was just I went to easy win because I knew you were Korean, okay? But actually, okay, the secret to why I think actually I got quite good at interviews is I never learned like the small talk to transition into real questions. If I meet someone, I just ask them the question I'm thinking of. So for example, I'll give you a quick example, right? Once I was going to a DreamHack event, like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and I was on and if you were like a commentator, they would actually pick you up in like a little minibus with a bunch of other people who were coming in on a flight like an hour later, And some guy sat next to me and he's like, "Hello, I'm from Israel." And I said, "Do you hate Palestinians?" That was like my first question to him, like at the start of like a 2-hour bus ride, right? Because I just want to know. And I thought, right, let's just get off the bat because wherever he goes with this, I need time to work with this. Like I need an actual chance to see where this can go. And so I never met that guy again.
Well, you get right to the interesting stuff.
Exactly. So here's my question for you along similar lines, Bishop. When Monty told me that you were coming on the show, okay, right? He told me, I've got this like Korean. He used to be a Korean pro, and then now he's actually like trying to do some coaching for a Western team. My mind was set to the filters of like, okay, it's going to be like a Loco Doco type figure, or it's going to be like I knew a couple of Korean people, for example, who were like native Koreans, but they had like good English because they had done pretty well in school or something. So I wasn't expecting you to have like an English accent. Well, you don't really, but you have like an American accent, So here's the obvious first question for me: why were you playing with Korean teams in Korea? Why not play with Western teams to begin with?
Well, at the time, I wasn't really planning on going pro until I was approached by a couple of teams here in Korea, and the thought never crossed my mind, playing for a Western team because I don't have citizenship, and that's obviously a big problem for me.
I mean, it's not because a lot of these teams are obviously getting P1 athletic visas, and most teams will get them for pro players. So, but yes, I do understand what you're saying. Like that obviously takes time. So
here's question 2. The other obvious, like, again, no small talk. So here's question 2, right? So you used to play for Kongdoo Panthera. Pretty good team. I mean, admittedly, they didn't do that great. Maybe I've already stepped in it there because they're pretty good now when you don't play for them anymore. They were all right before when you did play for them. So here's the question, though. Why are you becoming a coach now? This is literally your time to make the big bucks. You are Korean, you can speak English, people know you're Korean, people finally are accepting Koreans are really good. Now's your time to go and play in a Western team and make all the sick money. What are you doing coaching?
It's a question that gets kind of complicated, but
let's get complicated. Come on.
Easy answer would be the overall environment here in Korea when you're in a professional team is pretty oppressive at times. I really didn't enjoy myself playing here in Korea, and I guess I wanted to do something that was more fulfilling, and I thought that coaching would be more towards that. I also wanted to coach, considering my age right now, because when you're this old in Korea, it's pretty much time to retire.
You're 27, right?
28 at the moment. 27. Yes, my birthday hasn't passed. So
just for people who don't know. Okay, so have you done your military service?
Yes, I have.
Okay, but at that point in time, like there's very few Korean pros who are of this age, right?
Correct.
Okay. Was there a huge age gap between you and your Kongdoo teammates then?
The smallest gap would have been, I think, 5 years. The biggest gap being with Rascal. I think we're at 9 years of a gap.
Okay. And was that also part of what made it harder to kind of like live in a team house environment if you're 27, 28, as opposed to being a 19-year-old kid who thinks it's reasonable to not be allowed to talk to girls on the internet and have to play games all day?
No, I really enjoyed being with the whole Kongdoo family. It made me feel younger. and I really like the energy.
Man alive, okay.
Yeah.
So you were sapping their energy,
Yes,
feeling
I was
younger
sapping
with
their
the youth that you had acquired from them. Okay.
They're his version of the picture of Dorian Gray.
Okay.
Oof.
Right. Well, I mean, to be fair, seeing you now that you left the team and that picture when you were in the team, I think there's something to that theory, Monty. It's working out there. The portrait is no longer in the eye, is it? So, okay. So when you were actually in Kongdoo then, even though I joked and said like the team has gotten a lot better now, actually Panthera obviously was the one that people had hyped of the two teams last season of Apex. Actually, it was actually kind of a surprise that Unsea came out of nowhere and had this potential. Well, they could have gone much deeper perhaps in their playoffs. So what was your time during Panthera like? Like, did you guys really think you were a contender to win Apex? Was that realistic?
I think we all knew that it wasn't realistic, mainly because of our lack of teamwork to a certain degree. Our mechanical skills were all pretty high up there, but I'd say that our teamwork was just poor at the moment.
Okay.
Well, I think what struck me about watching you guys play is that obviously it wasn't in question any of your individual ability. There was a time in the first season of Apex when Brascal and Butcher and Evermore were all up at the very top end of the ladder, right? And you guys were, three of your players were competing for number one. So the mechanical skill was there, but these young guys were really playing like solo queue players. We saw so many times where Evermore would walk forward to try and get a hook and just die because he got May-walled off from the rest of you guys, and the positioning was just not there. And that's changed pretty substantially this season. I'm really surprised to see how fast it's changed, but it is quite different now.
Okay, so one of the things, actually, this is something we discussed on an early episode, was we talked about a couple of the people who were like really high up on the Korean ladder. Like, to what extent do you think people being amazing as like one tricks on the Korean ladder or just having very, very high ranking in Korea, like to what extent are those players, can they transition to being good players? You know, like I don't know what your background is entirely. You come from like Team Fortress or something, right?
I do not come from Team Fortress.
No?
I really don't have much of an FPS background other than Counter-Strike.
Well, I don't know if you're familiar then with League of Legends, but in League of Legends, you know, if you could be like a top 10, a top 20 player on the Korean ladder, you probably at least be on a pro team. You know, you'd at least be scouted in that sense. Is the Korean ladder at that point in Overwatch? Does the game suit it in that sense to be able to scout talent and know roughly like, you know, who's at least an insane talent if they're really high up?
I think most people agree with me that solo queue and 6 versus 6, you know, is a completely different game. So, in a sense, yes, but then no at the same time.
Okay.
Having high elo does prove that, you know, you understand how to win games, but it doesn't really necessarily transition into that you'd be good on a team.
Okay.
I think that's an obvious answer, I guess.
So, Monty, I remember you did say, this is a while ago, obviously, when we did the first episodes. I think after Lunatic-Hai, Panthera was the other Korean team really that you had like your eyes on, right?
Well, I think everybody had their eyes on it because there were a lot of rumors coming out of the teams about scrims where Panthera was doing well, or Panthera would be doing really well in online tournaments, but in Apex was really struggling with their teamwork. So there was a pretty big difference between what the pro players and the pro teams were saying and what the online results were showing and what Panthera was actually showing at LAN.
Okay. Like Bishop, when the Western teams first came to Korea for Apex, what were they actually like in terms of scrim environment? Like, did they scrim the same way Korean teams scrimmed?
One thing I noticed was that a lot of the Western teams would, you know, like to reset maps.
When they were losing, perhaps, immediately?
Right, so say you get held first point Numbani.
Oh, they do this in Overwatch too. No! Anyway.
Remake. It was going badly. Accidental remake. Okay. Come on, then. Explain it to us. Come on.
You reset the match so that you can have the full experience of pushing to point 2 or 3 instead of just pushing up to point 1 and then finishing the scrim there for that map. I noticed that a lot of Western teams did that, whereas a lot of the Korean teams would just not reset the game and try to play it out so that, you know, they could see whoever wins.
Yeah.
some more closer to a tournament environment. But that's one thing that I noticed. What was the question again?
I mean, what were the differences at that point, at least, between Western teams and Korean teams in terms of scrimming?
In season 1?
Yeah. Or you can contrast it to now if you want, if it's changed.
Well,
have you changed it since you've joined Cloud9 on trial? Have you changed any of those things?
Not really. I feel like the differences are starting to disappear, for sure.
Please
like I said,
some of those differences.
The differences as in, let's see, Korean teams would scrim to win, in general, I feel, whereas Western teams would scrim to practice certain strategies.
Okay.
That was the biggest difference that I felt was there. Currently, I feel like those differences have really diminished, and most teams right now are at least in the Premier League, scrim to practice for sure, instead of just simply winning.
Ah, okay. So
that's literally exactly the opposite of what...
Yeah, Koreans were behind how to practice in that sense. Because in other games, you have to understand, it's usually the other way around, Famously, the Koreans have a better sense of how to practice, whereas the Western guy just tries to play as though it was a match, and if he wins, thinks, I'm pretty good because I won against this good opponent, But it's the opposite in Overwatch, then.
That's what I felt.
Okay.
Interesting. It's very different than what Flame was talking about in our last episode, where he accused Western teams of scrimming to win and not actually doing very much to learn about the game or taking scrim results way too seriously based on win-loss records.
He might have just been talking a lot about NRG, though, in that particular segment.
Well, it's also possible that he's sitting in on what's going on in NA right now, as opposed to what Bishop's talking about is what's happening between the Korean and Western teams that are in Korea.
I haven't been exposed to that many Western teams. Pretty much right now it'd be the 4 teams here in Korea, so I wouldn't have as broad of a scope as Flame would have. But seeing, based on the results over here, I would say, that would be the case.
So what did you actually think of, like for example, as someone from the inside, how was Uncia able to kind of come out of nowhere and suddenly be the stronger of the 2 teams when it came to the playoffs last season? What do you think happened for them?
They were always kind of the underdog within Kongdoo as well. And I think that really triggered them to really try hard, really try hard. And, Korean professional gamers are naturally hungry to succeed for various reasons. But these guys were, on top of that, they were the underdog within Kongdoo. They always wanted to really make a name for themselves and tried really hard. So, teamwork-wise, they were miles ahead of Panthera at the moment, and I think that ultimately led them to have strong results in the end. Okay.
When Uncia did better overall, did that have anything to do with why Butcher transferred over from Panthera to Uncia? Was there anything behind that?
It's a good question. I'm assuming a lot of people might think of it that way, but he actually wanted to be a flex tank from the beginning, and he was kind of forced into the Reinhardt position on Panthera, so he was kind of playing a role that he really didn't feel comfortable with. He told me that he felt like he was reaching a ceiling, a skill cap, if you will, or something, and he wanted to improve more, but he felt like he hit a wall or something like that. So now he's in Uncia playing the flex tank role, and he's having a great time.
Okay. So, Monty, since that Panthera team kind of underwhelmed, like they didn't make the playoffs, for example, and not only did Bishop obviously leave, but they changed out like half the team pretty much. What is the difference between the old one and the new one, do you think?
I think they just have better use of their resources, and their rookie players have really stepped up. So the interesting progression that I saw from Kongdoo, which I saw them in snippets, right? And the last time that I saw them play before Apex Season 2 was actually, I went with Envy. They were scrimming, so Bishop was there at the time. They had a scrim day at the Kongdoo team practice facility, so I went there to watch them for a day. This was right before the finals with Envy, so it was sort of the last chance that I had to watch them practice actively. And so I saw the Apex Season 1, which was a lot of Rascal and Evermore getting caught out, not playing with the rest of their team, trying to make hero solo queue plays and being punished for it by well-coordinated teams on the other side. And then when I watched them for a day, it could have been just a good day or, for one of these players or a bad day for another one. But I will say that I noticed that when I watched them scrim Envy, that Evermore by that time, so by the end of the playoffs of Apex Season 1, Evermore's positioning had improved dramatically, and he was looking much more coordinated with his team. And Rascal was the one who was still getting caught out. So it used to be 2 of them, and then it had gone down to 1 of them. And then this season, Rascal's been doing much better at that as well. So I think it's been a slow process of integration into the rest of the broader teamwork aspect of their gameplay. So Rascal was still doing better at the time, but he would just get randomly caught out and die and do stupid stuff, go in too aggressively. And we've seen very little of that. And Rascal has really, I think, started to turn into a star in his own right as we look at his play this season.
Okay. Any of this sounding familiar, Bishop? What do you think of the new Panthera?
I wholeheartedly agree with what Monte said. They have gone through a lot of adjustments within the team, and instead of having key players just go off and make their own plays, they respect opponent teams more in the sense that they realize that the risk of doing those kind of plays isn't worth it. So playing as a team right now, I think Panther is a lot stronger. They have new players. People stepping up, really, yeah. Team's a lot stronger than it used to be.
So what I asked about the ranked mode in that sense of, do people just look at people who are high up and say, like, oh, if that guy's not in a team, let's consider him. How does a team I've noticed a lot of the newer players that come into teams, they're not necessarily all transfers from the other Korean teams that were in Season 1. So, for example, the new players in this team, Bling and the other guy, they both just,
For sure.
They came out of nowhere, right? How do they go about finding players like this? What's the process in Korea? Yeah, for sure.
Essentially, you put up an ad saying that some team is looking for players, right? And people start sending in emails.
Okay.
You look at their background, look at their achievements, their score. They essentially send you a little mini resume of themselves, a portfolio, and you go through them. You make a list of who you think might be good, and you designate 1 or 2 days to do tryouts.
Okay.
And for those 2 days, the whole team, usually the sister team, will help. They'll mix in professional players and tryouts and see who performs well. It's important to listen in on communication, and you narrow down the lists and eventually do scrims between the 2 teams, like Uncia and Panthera, with Panthera having their tryouts, the narrowed down tryouts in their team, and compare results. So eventually it's up to the players to choose who's good or not. And that's how the process goes overall.
Okay. So one thing I'm actually quite interested in is, obviously in Overwatch, in theory, there's nothing stopping teams from having sister teams. In fact, they have as many teams as they want in theory. Whereas that's something which began early on in League of Legends, and then famously, because Western teams were limited by the developer in that sense, eventually that finally came to the shores of Korea, and then they killed off all the sister teams and made it so you have to have one team. Now, obviously, it's not the case that everyone has a sister team. For obviously, Lunatic-Hai doesn't have a sister team that plays in Apex or anything like that, So, well, in that sense, Monty, what do you think about this? Is this going to remain a thing in Overwatch? Do you think you'll Lottery Watch and Kongdoo and all these teams will just be able to keep 2 teams, and if Kesper comes in, they'll be able to get 2 teams? What do you think?
I think it really depends on what goes on with the Overwatch League in Korea versus the current system. I think that recently one of the big points of news was that Nate Dancer, who's the director of Overwatch esports, has been in Korea taking meetings with the press and with potential team owners out here. And the question is going to be, and what he said is that they're not necessarily tied to regionalizing in Korea or even using the Overwatch League system. It's still going to be tailored by region. So it just depends on how that is going to affect it. Will Korea actually be part of the Overwatch League, or will it continue to run Apex as it is right now? And then what happens with the team system? Are they going to do the same sort of franchising thing in Korea as they are in the West. I personally don't think that regionalizing teams is good or necessary in Korea, because that's not really a thing that has happened. If you look at all the way that the baseball league, the KBO, runs here, none of the teams, they're sponsored by corporations, right? Like you have the Doosan Bears, or you have SK Wyverns, and it's less about location and more about the corporate sponsorship, because it gets really silly really fast when half the population of Korea lives in one city. It would be like 6 Seoul teams or whatever. So anyway, it's really hard to tell what the future is going to be because of this reason, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But I think that if the Korean teams want to maintain sister teams, or maybe if they have one professional team, it wouldn't be out of the question for them to maintain a sister team that would be in Challenger, or more like a minor division, like a AAA baseball team would be to a Major League Baseball team in the States. I think that may happen as well. But most Korean teams, when given the option to have these sister teams, have typically chosen that option in the past. And I'd like to talk to Bishop about that too, because he's one of the very few players that can really describe the sister team experience within recent memory in English. So whether he thinks it was valuable or not to the development of the Kongdoo teams.
It was definitely, and I think at this point now, one of the reasons why Kongdoo Panthera and Unsea are both strong, you see, when you have two teams, usually one team is going to be arguably better than the other, but when you scrim each other for a long time, so many times, you the skill sets that each team has, their advantages kind of rub off onto the other team, and essentially make each other stronger in that sense. But after a team has reached a certain point, I feel like having sister teams or having them scrim each other doesn't really help after a while. And I say this because, actually, I don't know why I'm saying this, but in the process of becoming a strong team, it's definitely good to have a sister team, because they point out the flaws for you, and they're essentially like your shadow boxing partner.
Sure. So one of the ways that it actually manifested early in League of Legends and helped out the Korean teams is basically, let's say this season, you had, like, let's say, for example, just off the top of my head, let's say Envyus ended up getting drawn against Kongdoo Panthera, in the first rounds of the playoffs. Then let's say Panthera had been practicing against Envyus a whole bunch. They could literally tell Unsea a bunch of the stuff, like, oh, they're going to play at this, they do these things, in a way where, in theory, Unsea could have an information advantage without having to have directly scrimmed against Envyus in that particular example I'm giving there. So that's actually one of the ways that in League of Legends it initially seemed to provide, like, not necessarily a direct advantage, but certainly it gave you something of an edge at times, right, Monty?
Yeah, I think it did give you an edge. I also think that there's a certain value in having a sister team that is going to have your back, basically. Somebody that you can reliably scrim with, that is still part of the same organization, so that improvement is faster when you can very openly share information between the two teams, because at the end of the day, you're still sort of on the same, like, part of the same organization. So it's not like you are out for blood with each other all the time, like you might be with a different team from a different organization. So I think it just becomes that improvement becomes faster when you have another group of players that are already within your circle of trust, and also just in the same facility, like Kongdoo was with you. You can walk over and discuss how things are going between your two teams and bounce ideas off each other about teamwork or coordination or compositions in a much more open way, and I think that communication probably, Bishop can tell me if I'm wrong, it's just my theory, helps out quite a bit when it comes to improving.
Can you tell him? Can you indeed do that, Bishop? Tell him if the communication. If you can't, I'll understand. But
I agree with what Monte has said for the most part. Yes,
it's too respectful. Okay. Is there anyone you hate in the Korean scene, Bishop? Is there anyone you'd like to see die?
No.
I bet there isn't either, is there, mate? You're just full of sunshine. Okay, well, okay. Here's a question for you then.
Maybe.
So, which team is more likely to win Apex this season, Panthera or Uncia? Tell me, Bishop. No waffling. It can't be both. Has to be one. Which one is it?
I'd say Uncia at the moment.
Okay, so you betrayed
Really?
you kind. Okay, right. Why is that?
Yes. Their coordination, I think it just shows that they have better teamwork overall.
Okay.
That's my answer.
Does Panthera have the better players though? He's like a poker player. He goes into one of those really deep thought things. Like, what am I going to say? Right? If A plus B. I've got to really think this through. Okay, come on. So, what's your answer?
Well, the players that I know, taking out the new players, I would say that Panthera would be stronger,
of course,
individually.
Why not?
But with the new players in, it'd be too early for me to say if they're better overall. I mean, individually than Uncia at the moment.
Right. So everyone who doesn't care about politeness, delete the last sentence and a half there. He said, yeah, Panthera has the better players, obviously. So, right. So Monty, what are your thoughts on that? Who's got a better chance to win out of the two?
I think it's hard to say. I think Panthera has had, both of them have not had the toughest groups so far in this tournament. Panthera has looked impressive on an individual level, and I think that in terms of mechanical skill, Rascal is probably one of the most exciting players that we have in Apex. The way that he's been able to single-handedly dominate a lot of the games that he's played in, if we look at his performance against Runaway and Fnatic, it has been extremely impressive. His hero pool is obviously huge. Like, this is a young kid with a lot of potential, and he's starting to live up to it. But that said, when I think about a lot of the teamwork and flanks that we've seen from Kongdoo Panthera, it has been very impressive to see how good their communication is, how smooth their management of their ult economy is, and how they're able to set up very complex flank plays, set up crossfires. And that to me, that coordination is definitely quite scary, and still scarier from Uncia, even if they don't necessarily have that same ceiling. Not to say that players like Birdring and Dance are not exceptional DPS players, because they are quite good, but I don't think either of them has that same potential that Rascal has.
Okay.
As a player, or even Evermore, depending on the day and how he's doing.
Like, Bishop, what did you think of when Panthera played Fnatic? Because I was thinking in that match there, okay, like that's always been the MO of the Panthera players. Like, yeah, they've got some good players, but is the teamwork really there? And then Fnatic, in theory, that's like that's their bread and butter. Is they're supposed to be the team from the West that has the really good coordination and teamwork, and everyone knows their role. So I was kind of surprised that Panthera beat them like that. What did you think of when they matched up in that group?
Well, the thought that was going in my mind at the moment was, if Panthera polished up their teamwork as much as I have heard, they would easily win.
Okay. So you're not big on Fnatic then?
I respect the team, but Panthera is a team with a bunch of individuals that are really hungry to succeed, and they commit a lot to the game. They practice a bunch. So with the practice, with the teamwork there, like Monte mentioned, Panthera is probably going to be a force to be reckoned with. I was excited to see them play as a team. It made me proud.
It made him proud. Cool. Okay.
It really did.
Monty, what have you thought of Fnatic matching up in this group? Because I mean, that's part of where like the hype of Panthera's come from, right?
Sure. I still think Fnatic has those same issues. We keep going back to it. They don't really have a star player who's going to be that big carry that they need to push them to the next level, even though I think their preparation, their teamwork is quite good. I think that when we look at what Rascal did to them almost single-handedly, it's kind of depressing from a Fnatic point of view, because you don't want to see them get absolutely wrecked like they did by a single player. And they've got a lot left, I believe, to overcome if they want to do well in the remainder of this particular tournament. I don't exactly know how they're going to do against Runaway, because Runaway doesn't have the same level of coordination that Kongdoo Panthera does right now, but at the same time, they have this triple DPS combination and some promising DPS players of their own, like Cox. So I'm not sure if they're actually going to be able to pull out a win there or even contain that DPS.
Bishop, do you think Fnatic will beat Runaway?
I'm going to say it's going to be a close game, but I think they have a good chance. It's really hard to predict who's going to win between the two.
What are your thoughts
Really
on the Runaway team?
They changed their roster a lot.
Yep.
This time they came in with a stronger DPS setup, I think. Each player kind of carries their team in their own way, so it would really depend on how Fnatic comes out. If they're going to come out with a death ball, let's all stick together and spearhead through their comp, or if they're going to come up with a, let's divide our team into a flanking force and a main force. It really depends, and I think that they're going to have a better shot with a death ball spearhead type of composition against Runaway at the moment.
Okay. Right, Monty, obviously it would put Bishop in an awkward position if I asked him who was going to win out of Cloud9 and Kongdoo Panthera. So I'll ask you, who will win out of Cloud9 and Kongdoo Panthera?
Kongdoo Panthera probably has a very large advantage heading into that match. C9 obviously made a lot of roster changes just before coming here, and they started to build out their support staff, and you can see that obviously Bishop
they have
is
a spy already
sitting.
So that helps, right?
Yeah, that's right. Kongdoo Panthera has the spy, already implanted the mole to feed the strat straight to the organization.
Okay.
But Bishop, no, you can see he's sitting in the Cloud9 practice room here in Seoul right now, and so he's been helping them out. And as much as I think Cloud9 has improved, I think it's very hard to say that Kongdoo Panthera doesn't have an upper hand, considering they've just been together and practicing efficiently for longer. Yes, they had some roster changes as well with Butcher coming in, but they also had more time to adjust to those particular changes. And I think Kongdoo Panthera definitely a contender for the title of Apex this season, and Cloud9. Unfortunately, when they dropped the ball to Afreeca Blue, there's not a lot of hope for them making it out of the group.
Okay. So, Bishop, who's going to win out of Cloud9 and Kongdoo Panthera? See what I did there, viewers? Come on, Bishop, tell me, who's going to win?
Honestly, I would say Uncia
Man alive.
has
Okay, well, bold.
a better chance.
Come on, keep going. Yeah. They've got a better chance?
Yes.
Okay, what do you think Cloud9 has to do to beat them then?
Think harder. Respect opponents more. For example, if they come out with a Widowmaker, don't try to challenge the Widowmaker. Play smart, play as a team. Okay. Look at the bigger picture. Look at your time back when you're defending. Things like that. Just it's playing as a team more. It's going to be difficult.
So what did you think about the last match between Cloud9 and Afreeca Blue? Because there were a lot of mistakes that people were picking on there. I think some too much about stepping off the control point. That was partially their fault at one point, partially was a graviton on the second point. But when we look at when you say don't challenge them, I really agree with that, because I felt like there was a lot of ego on Cloud9 in that match versus Afreeca Blue, where they wanted to 1v1 people. They wanted to take the duels. They wanted to win. They thought they were more mechanically skilled. And so they got sucked into this trap of constantly fighting these little mini battles, as opposed to focusing on the bigger picture and what they needed to do as a team in order to win that game. Whereas Afreeca Blue was not quite... It was a sloppy match, no doubt, from both sides, but Afreeca Blue was less prone to take those ego battles and try and win them. But it looked to me when I was watching Cloud9 that, especially when they were playing 3 DPS heroes and wanting to just outplay their opponents all the time, it was a little much.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And a lot of my job has been to, shift the focus of the team towards more coordinated team play, and that showing them up the light, if you will, of teamwork. And I think a lot of it is paying off recently. Hopefully Tuesday will be a great match against Uncia.
Because that's the thing about Cloud9, right?
Okay.
Is that the mechanical skill of the players is not in question. I
Yes.
mean, clearly there are some very good players on that team. It's more been a matter of, can you keep the egos in check in the game long enough that they can actually make smart decisions? Because I've been impressed with the flexibility of the roster. I think Gods has been pretty good on Genji, which was sort of a surprise to me coming in. I think that Surefour has been solid on the Zarya for the most part, even though he's shifting into a role that he hasn't played quite as much before, even giving up the Tracer over to Mendo a lot of the time. And it's been interesting to watch them because we've seen such large hero pools and also overlap between the three DPS. So in theory, what's so interesting about this team for me is that in theory, this should be a team that with this versatility can swap team compositions very efficiently. Like, you don't have to wait for a guy to use his ultimate. If somebody just used theirs and needed a Zarya or a Roadhog, we've seen like three guys. I think we've seen all three DPS players play Roadhog at different times on this team. So you should be able to switch efficiently based around ult charges, or you should be able to make a huge number of team compositions because you don't just have one Tracer player, right? You can swap hero pools and who's playing Tracer based on the rest of the hero pool for Surefour and Mendo. So it's interesting to me that they haven't seen really the value or haven't been able to implement that idea of teamwork, because the theoretical flexibility of this Cloud9 roster is actually pretty cool, and I think has the potential to have a very high skill ceiling as long as they can make it there as a unit instead of just toying around individually.
Okay. Because the thing about that group was that's probably the most confused group you've ever seen, because it could be expected that Uncia would be the best team. Okay, that's not unreasonable. But then who saw all these results coming where it's like, okay, so Afreeca Blue beats C9. Oh, maybe they're better than... Oh, no, they've lost to Conbox. Like, what do you actually make of that group, Monty? It makes no sense, right?
I think Afreeca Blue is really not a very good team right now, which is why I thought C9 actually had a pretty good shot against them. And to be fair, even though they lost 1-3, the individual maps tended to be relatively close. But I think that's a match, given that Afreeca Blue has not really shown the best coordination this season, not really shown the best ult management, been overly reliant on... I don't even know why they do this. So they say in all of their interviews, oh, Arhan's going to carry us. We'll just carry Arhan, or Arhan, we're just going to protect him. And I think that Arhan must be some crazy cult leader who has brainwashed the rest of his team, because his Genji play hasn't even been that good this season, and he's certainly not carrying the team. But for some reason, now remember, this is a team with Recry, and Recry has been excellent since the playoffs last year. But somehow, I don't know if Arhan has been sitting there dangling the pendulum in front of their eyes, hypnotizing his teammates to say this shit, but like, he's not the one they should be protecting at this point. Everybody should be playing around Recry, who's been much more consistent and had a deeper hero pool. But for some reason, they keep letting him play the Genji. Arhan messes up on the Genji, messes up his reflex, messes up his duels, and goes in too early with his Dragon Blade. And then his team's like, wow, we just got to protect Arhan. He's going to win us the game. He's not winning you the game, guys. Time to change strategies. What the hell is actually happening there?
Okay, Bishop, you got to talk to me here.
Where's your sweet Korean gossip?
Monty has gone completely... He's spoken out against the god Arhan. He's now in favor of the usurper Recry. Explain to me what's going on here.
Well, I think part of it is the Korean hype. And a lot of the interviews are kind of swayed towards certain aspects. But I think a Genji player is only as good as his team or his or her team would allow him or her to be. Like a nano boosted Genji can only do so much when he's going in point blank against a team of 6 people that are prepared, because they'll know when a Genji is going to use his sword and get nano boosted. But if the team with the Genji creates a distraction, per se, and a Genji goes in when that distraction is being made, he's going to be a lot stronger. Afreeca Freecs Blue really likes running the double DPS comp. We've seen a lot of McCree Genji with Recry on McCree, and that kind of it forces you're sacrificing a lot of momentum or potential distractions that you can create for the Genji player. This can be arguable in that McCree could use a High Noon in front and then have a Genji go through the sidelines and get nano boosted there. But overall, when you have triple tanks, I feel like the Genji player would be allowed to make more plays because he'd be getting a lot more care from his team.
Okay.
But recently, we've seen Arhan kind of play out of sync with his team. And theoretically, and based on his past performances, he should be able to do what Genjis are supposed to do and single-handedly carrying the game with the sword. There's been nerfs, however, and more teams are well prepared. More teams are getting better prepared for Genji plays, and I think that's one of the trademarks of Korean teams at the moment, just having explosive Genji plays. But people are learning to adapt. Teams, are more prepared for those kind of things. So I think Arhan is having a tougher time.
I see. But it's not even that. It's like watching their last match against Conbox, and he'll just go in with no Zarya protection. Their composition doesn't even make sense because there's no protection for him sometimes, or there's just a Zarya bubble, and there's clearly no communication happening because he'll pull out a sword, dash into the back line, and just die instantly. Or he'll use it when his Ana has 85% of an ult charge instead of just waiting for those last 15%. And then the nano boost and the blade are never synced up for the rest of the match. It's very weird to watch them play at the moment. And they have totally, I think, degraded in terms of their ability to coordinate as a team. Part of that may have been the roster changes they went through, but it just seems to me that I feel bad for Recray because I think he's like an Elo hell right now, where this guy probably deserves to be on a much better team than he's on, or one that can actually work around him. But it's bizarre to me that the management or the coaching staff like Tyrong from Afreeca can't get them to play around their more consistent strength, which has been Recry basically since November, December.
Well, I agree. Against Conbox, Arhan wasn't playing at his best. The team was kind of falling apart. I could see some people tilting, perhaps, and yeah. I don't think the management hasn't tried creating a team more fitting towards Recry. I think it's just that they can't at the moment with their roster. Arhan's other characters aren't as strong as his Genji, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was a roster change after this season.
Okay. All right. Well, those are the two groups that have yet to conclude, obviously, but we have concluded the other two groups, and we certainly had some interesting final games. So, Monty, you've taken the hype down on Arhan a whole lot. You've let us know how you really feel about him and the fact that he's essentially the prison guard, the warden of Elo Hell for Recry, right? He's the head guy who's standing in his way and refuses to turn off the monitors and let him escape. But if you're going to go that way from someone who was held in high esteem, Monty, we've got to pay it forwards, and you've got to give some love to Lunatic-Hai, because if you remember when we had that episode Reinforce, you had them not getting out. You had it being Misfits and Luxury Watch who are going to get out of that group. So what's been different about Lunatic-Hai in how they've played in the Apex this season?
Well, first off, they managed to get rid of Lunatic-Hai, which was huge for them. That
somehow does keep looking more and more like the most epic, political behind the scenes, smear that has actually worked and made the team better. I've never seen something like that in my life. A team gets better because of some political bullshit. How do you do that? My life.
So there are a couple of things. So first off, it's a great meta, no doubt, for Lunatic-Hai. When we look at, for example, Miro's Reinhardt play, he's okay, but he's not particularly impressive. But especially when we compare it to the insanity that is his Winston play, and how marvelous was it in that last match when he managed to punch Mercy off of the map on Ilios, and that was fucking crazy. It was Ruins. It was where he punched Mercy. Pretty sure it was yeah. He punched Mercy off the map in ult form, and then managed to make it back safely. So his knowledge of his limits on Winston is just insane. So I love when we see those kind of plays from him, but those kind of plays have not typically been possible when he's not playing Winston. And so the dive compositions have been working really well for them. Who are you? Definitely a solid Genji player. I personally have been wary about hyping him up too much because I think that his success on Genji is a large part due to the skill of his tanks and supports. I think you put another Genji player, I think you put Haksal in that same situation, he looks amazing too. Not to say, Haksal is obviously a good Genji player too, but I think people have been going too far saying that Who Are You is like the best Genji or a top 3 Genji. I think it's hard to tell because Zunba and Jaehong are so fucking good at protecting him. And the dive compositions that we've seen work so well from Lunatic-Hai are perfect for this particular meta. They don't really have to move off the Genji Tracer very much these days. And while Eska hasn't been spectacular, when you have such a wonderful supporting cast, when your supports and tanks are as strong as they are on Lunatic-Hai and can dictate the pace of the engage, Eska doesn't actually have to do very much. Not dying is basically all he has to do if they're going to take a strong position in the standings. So they've been really good at playing to the conditions of this meta. This meta allows them to play the dive compositions with little variation. If they just want to play dive, they can play it basically every game, and they're not going to be punished for a lack of depth to their hero pools, which I think is the main source of criticism that you could level at them right now. But whether it's because they can't play other heroes or whether that it's just because they realize that this is great for the meta and they can keep doing it and winning, I don't know.
See, when you said that about who are you and his Genji, it actually reminded me, so I just looked it up now, because there was an interview I saw today, a very brief one that he did with Inven Global, and I realised, right, because he's a fairly new player, I assume he's fairly young, you know, I'm not sure like what method of translation they used for this interview, but this answer right here, Monty, will tell you why a lot of insight into the Korean scene isn't going to come from the Koreans themselves, okay, because someone actually asked him about his Genji, so you're probably thinking, wow, it's probably going to be something interesting. So here we go, Kemi. They said, is there any special reason why you are so good with Genji? So he answered, I like Genji because I like ninjas and assassins. I've been playing Genji since a long time ago, and now I'm a skilled Genji player. That's the end of the answer, by the way. Like to go to another question at that point in time. Well,
Great
we've
answers,
all learned
man.
something. We've all learned something new. So, Bishop, what do you think of Lunatic-Hai? Are they the best Korean team?
I've been saying this before the season even started, and yes, I do think that they are the strongest Korean team at the moment.
Okay. So wait a minute. So you were saying it while Lee Jun was still in the team?
Well,
I think I've got you there.
He didn't necessarily have to play.
Okay. You didn't know if he'd be in the lineup.
So, yeah, with an ideal lineup, they would still be strong even with Lee Jun in.
Okay. So what makes them so good?
What makes them so good? Well, they found their niche team color, I'd say. For example, if you look at Meta Athena, they have a really strong explosive Zarya player like Hoon, and they really play around him. You'll see every Nana boost literally going to their Zarya player so that he has his ult up like every single fight. Now, on the other hand, you look at Lunatic-Hai, they have really explosive Genji plays on Who Are You. So, you know, every team with their own strong color, their bread and butter, is a strong contender for Apex Season 2 at the moment, is what I'd like to think. Lunatic-Hai is strong because they have a great support player, they have great tanks, and this kind of goes back to what I said about Genji players being only as good as their team allows them to be. They have a great foundation for DPS players to really go in and make amazing plays. So that being said, they have that with the strong foundation and they're a team that's been together for a long time. All these advantages really kind of synergize with each other, I think, and to making them the strongest Korean team.
Is that actually like a Korean thing? Is that where you took that terminology of like the team color or whatever? It's a good way to describe it. Cause obviously, it's like describing like an aspect of themselves, or is that just a Bishop thing?
It's a Korean thing.
Okay, that's
Usually
like terminology
say,
they use.
Yes, find your team color to some degree.
Okay, I mean, obviously that could be confusing since they have actually named all their teams after colors. So I'm just saying, like maybe that's just what been misunderstood a little bit there. Well, we've called ourselves Afreeca Red and they're blue. Now you got to kind of find your color though.
Yeah, just reading the aura of the team. Yeah. You are the red team.
You use a cerulean camera, and then you know how you should play as a team. Like, we're going to go more DPS style in this team, I reckon. Right? Okay, so here's the question then, Monty. So the team that, for obvious reasons, came in really hyped in this group was Luxury Watch Blue. And obviously they'd taken in Flower, Nanohana, or whatever his name is, and they looked like potential champions of Apex. So what have you actually made of them overall? Like, is it Lunatic-Hai just being so much stronger and they're still good? Have they underwhelmed you a bit?
I think that there's still definitely a lot of room for LW Blue to grow in this particular meta. I think that they were caught off guard by Lunatic-Hai's dive compositions when they did play against them. But I think LW Blue certainly has a chance to win this and can easily bounce back with the strength of their players. We look at you look at a guy like Flower, you look at a guy like Janus, who is definitely one of the stronger Reinhardt players that we have in Korea, and losing one match I don't think is the end of the world for them. They can certainly bounce back and be the champions of this season if necessary.
Okay.
So I don't read too much into what we've seen from them so far, because they're out of their group, they're making it through. What matters is how they adapt to the patch in the long term. But I don't think it has been as advantageous for LW Blue to be in the current state of meta affairs as it has been so perfect for Lunatic-Hai.
Were they as hyped in the Korean scene when they put this roster together, Bishop? Because I mean, obviously they took over like a few big name players from the other lineup, from the red lineup, and to Westerns at least, it looked like this should be a really strong team. Was there that sense in Korea?
No, there was not that much hype.
Okay, because interesting enough, I'd heard from some of the Lunatic-Hai players or something didn't think that Misfits or LW Blue were going to be like super good in this group or something. Why was there no hype around them then, or not as much?
Why? This is somewhat of a sensitive topic. It would have to do with the past of some players that are in Luxury Watch at the moment, but this is a sensitive topic.
We've talked about the Ilbay stuff before.
Okay, well, because of that,
it's all public. It's all public.
Because yes, it is public, and because of that,
you're not in Korea anymore, Bishop. I mean, no, you literally are, but you're emotionally not in Korea anymore, mate. You're safe now. You've got that sick Western dollar that will protect you. Come on, you have immunity.
Well, because of that, and because the Korean esports community is so small and knit together, that is why they weren't given that much hype.
Okay, so in that case, let's ask you this. Is LW Blue the team that, in that case, no one in Korea wants to succeed? Are they the guys going against the grain trying to win?
Yes. A lot of people don't really want to see them succeed, really.
Okay.
So because you can explain this as a Korean netizen, a lot of people in the West sort of don't understand what Ilbay is or how it differs from, say, shit posting on 4chan in the West, for example, right? And I know some of the differences, but can you explain why this is much more serious and why this was taken so, like, to be so offensive in Korea?
Well, I think the trademark of Ilbay users would be that they really disgrace the elderly or your parents, per se. Okay. They're also very disrespectful towards people that have passed away. President Rowe, who is no longer here, is frequently brought up in Ilbe. Ilbe stands for Ilgan Best. It's like a community portal where people just kind of enjoy shit talking a lot. And the way they talk about things is really offensive towards a lot of people.
I mean, but this sounds like 4chan, right?
Yeah.
So, like, this sounds like 4chan, but the difference is that a lot of, from my understanding, a lot of what happens with Ilbe is that it spills over into the real world, and it's not like anonymous protests where people are wearing Guy Fawkes masks and saying that, like, for example, like showing up to protest Scientology, right, which may be seen as a more like a moral action for a lot of people in the West. For example, one of the things that members of Ilbe did, which was like pretty shitty of them to do, was you guys may not know, you can look this up, but there was a ferry that sunk and killed like 300 high schoolers, which was considered a national tragedy, called the Sewol, the ferry. And what happened was the government really did not respond to the sinking of the ferry particularly well or efficiently at all. So one of the parents of the children who died was outside of, basically in the main square in Seoul, protesting, and he was on a hunger strike, and an Ilbe member literally came up and they were sitting there like eating food in front of him. Like, it's like next level rude and inappropriate, right? I mean, that's pretty fucked up thing to do to a grieving parent. And there's not a reason. It's just because they're an asshole, right? So I think that it's more extreme.
So it's like if 4chan had the political methods of the Westboro Baptist Church.
Yes, pretty much. That's actually a very good analogy. Well done, Thorin. I think that's actually relatively accurate.
And so some of the players were found to be members of this community, right?
But here's the kicker, right? They had posted there years ago, right? So here's what I don't understand. Like, yes, I do understand that this is bad and it's pretty shitty of these people to do, but one of the things is that there were no posts, as I understand it, that were specifically tied to these players, right? They didn't find something specific that they had said, correct?
No, there have been screenshots of, what they've been...
But how long ago was this? Because we're talking, this was years ago, right?
It's back when the players were playing Team Fortress 2.
So we're talking, I personally think it's interesting that they are held accountable. These kids, like, what, Flower's like 17? Mm-hmm. So we're talking about shit he was saying when he was 13 on the internet? I mean, is there no fucking grace period for these kids who are just being dumb kids? I just don't understand why they should be held so stringently for shit that happened literally years ago, that may not, when they were young teenagers, that may not reflect who they are and what they're doing now.
That is something that I really disagree with as well. In Korea at the moment, like, when you're young, you're bound to do a bunch of dumb shit. It just happens. Did
they show remorse though when this all came out? Like, did they seem genuine, like that they were apologetic and that sort of thing?
Yes, they did put up apologies online.
No, but did it seem genuine? You know, did it look like they were told to do it by, like, you know, the team said just do this?
Obviously, they were told to do it.
Okay.
Clearly.
Is the sentiment in the community that people think, you know, they probably don't believe it, or
probably?
It sounds like Korea actually believes sort of what. Like, okay, again, if you're not from League of Legends, it sounds like Korea actually believes in the concept that Riot Light of League of Legends approach of toxicity, which is that notion that, like, it is just some sort of like force within humankind or something that, like, lurks. It's almost like some sort of like. It's like the reason why the Germans are never allowed to talk about any Nazi stuff is all there's like some body national thing that's like lurking below the surface. Like, we can never allow it to be tapped into. The force will be too much, like some anime level shit. And if these guys haven't actually like banished it entirely from themselves, then you know that you can still see the darkness within Flower.
Here's what I think is ridiculous. So I agree. This would be like, I think the equivalent, as close as you can get, would be an NA player posting on some sort of like white nationalist site. Not to say that Ilbe is racist or anything like that. I'm just trying to find the equivalent like moral or ethical offense between societies. So it would be like, for example, we heard about a Western player who is well-known, star player, who had been posting on white nationalist websites, okay, when they were 13. And at a certain point, you got to say, well, in my opinion, well, that's pretty shitty. Like, they shouldn't have posted on those white nationalist sites. But they were also 13 fucking years old. And at what point do we say these people have changed, or these people can change, or should this ruin their professional careers when this happened years ago and it does not have a track record of happening currently? Right? You issue your apology, you fucking move on. So I guess that's what it's because, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not like they've been doing that during their Overwatch career, right? They, for all we know, left that behind.
Yes, they have left that behind. It's just the whole esports community right now is on a witch hunt to some degree, where they're just looking for mistakes to kind of, excuses, if you will, to bring their popcorn out and just have a good time watching the drama unfold and people shit talk against each other and watching people's careers get ruined and whatnot.
Well, and I will say, that's not unique to Korean culture. Like, we have fucking tabloids in the West, and people, get off on seeing celebrities at their lowest, right? It's sort of this sick facet of human culture. But I will say that the Koreans in general, when it comes to esports, it comes to K-pop too, they have the biggest justice boner that I've ever seen. Like, they love people, like, holding people accountable for ridiculous shit that happened years ago that doesn't have any bearing on this person's current life or the lives of the fans, really. They get so wrapped up in making sure that everybody is apologizing and behaving to a standard that the people who are demanding this standard don't even live up to themselves, most likely. And I really do. It makes me sad a lot of the time to see the community be like that. Because I don't think that Flower and LW and his teammates and everybody should be fucking ruined because of shit that happened years ago that was dumb teenager shit.
So here's the
problem. I think
problem,
they should be given a second chance, right?
When he actually explained that fully, like, I didn't know some of that context of, like, the sort of things that they say. Obviously, that is pretty pretty rude,
bad.
It's pretty horrible, I don't necessarily think it's like the notion that you can't do it. Like, it should be freedom of speech and stuff. But obviously, people, as a result of freedom of speech, should be able to look down on you and go, that's kind of fucked up that that's in your brain and that's what you're joking about. Okay.
Yeah, you could say it, but you're also responsible for the reaction of everybody else who can say, fuck you, you're a disgusting piece of shit. Sure,
but here's the problem, though. Even though I know that's the context of what they did wrong, that's making people hate on them, I can't help but admit that does make Flower seem even cooler. And now I really want, like, True Watch to win, just to, like, fuck with the whole scene and really upset the House of Cards. And then I hope, like, Kesper comes in, because obviously the Korean government's like, something must be done about this Overwatch. These people from Milbay are winning the game. And then in comes, like, all the Koreans start, like, teaming up. Like, that Recry guy gets just, like, commissioned to shipped off to, like, play in, like, just some better team. You can put him in any of the teams at this point. He goes on to another good team, and every Korean team's like battling just to beat this one team.
So, as usual, you just like to see the apple cart getting tipped over.
I also, just for some reason...
you just love anime plot lines in real life.
Yeah. But here's the problem, though. If you've noticed, and especially as someone who's followed a lot of games, it's not a coincidence, right, that you nearly always get someone like this in every game who is both, like, always on the borderline of what's acceptable socially and like, in terms of, like, their reputation, yet is also simultaneously one of the most talented and, like, fantastic players. It happens again and again in, like, every game I've followed. And so those people, just for their play, would be appealing, but it adds, like, an extra dimension to them when they've got almost that weird contrast in terms of how they are as a person, right?
Is Flower the simple of Overwatch?
Maybe is. The forgiven of Overwatch could be. Right? The problem is that, like, to be fair, there isn't really an equivalent, unfortunately, on that extremer level, because the difference is people like Simple, people like Forgiven, mainly were just toxic. I mean, I'm not even going to use that term. They were just bad teammates, essentially. That's all they really did. Like, they were bad sports, and they were bad teammates, and they were young as well. Whereas none of them, like oh no, I've actually got one for you. Actually, you're not wrong. You won't have known this much. This is a long time ago. But actually, Simple, when he was quite young, because he became like a very good player when he was like 16 years old. For context, Bishop, I don't know if you still follow Counter-Strike, but Simple is like one of the best players in the world now. Plays in one of the top, top 5, top 6 teams.
Yes.
But a few years ago, he was like a prodigy, He was like a 16-year-old who already was amazing at the game. And as a young, like 16, 17-year-old, when streaming first came into CSGO and got reasonably big, in one of his like early streams, he did a stream where someone just mentioned in the chat something like about Germany. And he was like, Germans? Zig Heil, motherfuckers, see you in hell. And like just on his stream, just broadcasting that to the internet. And so unsurprisingly, people got a little bit pissed off by that, Monty, believe it or not. But
Weird.
this is good context, okay? This is the difference between maybe the West and Korea. He has gotten over that. No one ever brings it up anymore. And he's even since played in tournaments, including a major in Germany, and there wasn't any problem. So amazingly, I didn't realize this would ever be the case, Monty, but maybe the West internet culture is actually more forgiving. I realize in our own little petty bubbles, it doesn't seem that way, but maybe there is some forgiveness, some grace period, That was, I can't lie though, that was an epic thing to say. It was very stupid, but it was epic. It's certainly bold. You've got to give him that. Haven't you? It's because it's the same thing though, Monty. It's because it's someone, unfortunately, like this is why I actually do feel a bit sorry for those players in Overwatch. It's because, mate, they were in Team Fortress 2. That is a game that for a Korean you were never going anywhere in that game. You were never going to be some world famous player. There was never going to be a huge esport, You're not thinking at the time, like, what's the future going to be like? Your future's probably get a real job, go to the army, like standard stuff. So even though it doesn't justify it, it is kind of bad that like later on it's like, oh, someone's made sort of like a Team Fortress 2 game that can be a huge esports game. Cool, I'm getting involved in it. Wait a minute, this isn't you on this old website, is it? Shit.
Well, who's even thinking about that when they're that age either? Right.
Well, this is why I'll tell you a story, right? Okay. And Monty, I don't give a fuck, so I'll just tell this story, okay? So famously, when some quite well-known people in StarCraft 2 got really famous, because again it was the same scenario. StarCraft Brood War, if you were in the West, was not a big game, like maybe if you were one of the best players in your country you could go like World Cyber Games, but you weren't going to make like $100,000 a year, and you were never going to be a really big esports star. Warcraft 3 was the big esports game in the West in RTS, Counter-Strike, so it was one of the smaller ones. It was very much a niche community, and so sites like Team Liquid, they were just like the equivalent of like a small community site where everyone knew everyone. And so the problem was in StarCraft 2, a lot of these casters and players got really big profiles, the game blew up, and then they suddenly remembered one day, shit, I've got thousands of posts on Team Liquid from all those years when I was 15. So they all went back like clever people and deleted them. But you know what they didn't count for, Monty, is that on Team Liquid, you can delete all your posts, but if someone quoted a post, it doesn't get deleted in the quote. So all I'm going to say, I'm not going to say anything more than this. If you know who the guy Day9 is, he's a very famous guy. He's one of the best casters of all time. All I'm going to say is search for Day9 Team Liquid Wicker Basket, and you will find a story that will set your hair on end. It's not anything bad. He didn't do anything bad. It's just the sort of story you might tell when you were like 16 that you would not tell when you're a professional, when you are not 16. So that's all I'm going to say. That's a little Easter egg for everyone out there. There's not many people probably care about it in Overwatch, but it's fucking epic, mate. There's a reason why I called him the Wicker Man for many years. Anyway, so we'll come back to Overwatch now. Come back, everyone. It's okay. It's safe now, Bishop. We can talk about Overwatch again, mate. So, taking aside all of the...
I like how you just mercilessly take a shovel to the graveyards of people's past and start exhuming corpses.
Yeah. Well, I became Korean. Nice. Yeah, I've actually decided the Korean way is better, Monty. So I'm actually adopting that and holding them accountable for things they did when they were 16. So okay, Bishop, taking aside
it wasn't enough that Flower was in this position. Now we have to put others in this position.
Yes, everyone must be compromised.
Is this part of your scientific experiment to see if the West will behave in exactly the same way as the Koreans have?
I want to see what happens in that sense. So, Bishop, if you ignore all this like bad ill feeling towards the LW Blue guys, could they actually win Apex, do you think?
I'd say no. I expect them to perform very well, but no. I feel like they lack in certain areas. Mainly having a real strong team color.
Team color, yeah.
They're just. I feel like they're just really, really safe team, but based on my experiences on LAN and overall scrims, a team with a strong color may be easier to counter, but when a team is just overall just reactive and plays really safe most of the time on LAN, they're going to lose.
Okay.
They may prove me wrong, but that is my expectation of LTB Blue at the moment.
What do you think of that, Monty?
I'm curious from Bishop's perspective when we talk about team color to move this into the focus of his work with Cloud9 so far. So if you believe that the strong teams have a strong identity and a style, as we would say in the West, what are you pushing Cloud9 to become? Right? What do you think is the highest potential? What is the color of Cloud9 as you see it right now? And where are you moving this team? Because I think they could be moved in a lot of different directions, like I said before, based on their versatility. But what is your concept of C9 as a team, and where are you trying to coach them? Like, what is the color that you are creating or helping to refine?
A more support and tank-based approach, I think, because I mentioned a lot of the players having, Monty, you raised the issue of ego plays and whatnot. I'm trying to convince the team more or less to.
I like the way he phrased that there, right? He was like, I did say before that the team had a lot of. No, actually, Monty said that the team had a lot of ego play. All right, let's
go.
Exactly. He's like, oh, this is not my
proxy,
opinion.
aren't you, Monty?
Yeah. You voiced this opinion.
Monty is the proxy for all criticism.
I like the fact that he's like, I'm trying to convince them, which is Korean code word for I'm the young, but they don't understand that I'm the older brother, so they don't listen to me, so I have to convince them now. Usually, when I just said shit, people did it who are younger than me, but now, I don't know.
Okay.
I know you're
guilty charge.
Anyway, so what are you trying to convince them of ever so gently? And
easier
based on my opinion.
It's easier
better not.
It's easier to make stronger challenges when you have the team backing you up and knowing that you're going in for a challenge per se.
Okay.
A lot of times people go into committing towards challenges without letting the team know, and this is when it comes out. The results are good. You eventually get the kill, and it's okay. But on LAN, it's not going to happen all the time. Usually, it's a really risky play, and I believe it's a high risk, low return play, especially when you're on defense and whatnot. So I guess we're trying to make the team go, not necessarily to. I'm pushing the team towards, not necessarily making less, taking less risks, but taking calculated risks, and if we're taking those risks, making the team prepared for losses that might be, consequences from those risks.
When did you actually start with the team? When did you start working with them?
It's been about 2 weeks and a half, 3 weeks, I think, that I've been with the team, and so far I'd like to say that there's been a lot of improvements.
Okay. So one of the things that I find interesting is that when you say you want to focus this more around the tanks. So for me, in the last match that Cloud9 played against the AF Blue, probably the best player was Rib. I thought he had the best performance on the team from a teamwork and cohesive angle. When you say you're going to switch to tanks, though, Rib is the only dedicated tank that you have because you sort of have 3 DPS players.
Yes.
And what does that mean for Cloud9 when we talk about having a more tank-based approach, because this is a team that doesn't operate with a lot of tanks?
It's a good question. First of all, having a player dedicate their role into tanking, so less of a flex tank, but more of a real tank role along with Rib. And second, allowing. Right now, it was. Short 4 was on Zarya last patch.
Right.
I mean, this time I think we're gonna try having Mendo being in the middle and coordinating tank plays. And second, that being the first point. The second point would be having our tank players really focus on initiating good fights so that our DPS players can follow up with strong plays. Just step by step. You know, you have the tanks initiate a fight, and you have the DPS go in when it looks good. That's what I meant by, you know, shifting the team's focus more towards tanks, in a sense, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, it does now. That's why it was so confusing, because C9 had been wanting to run triple DPS compositions in their last match. But it's interesting to me that's why the question came up as to who is going to take this tank role that you really want to see. So why is that? What is not working about triple DPS, and why do you feel that you need a dedicated off-tank player?
Well, to answer the first question, triple DPS is very hit or miss a lot of the times. And the way defense kind of works on first point payload maps is it's kind of a paper, rock, scissors. You either find a well-balanced composition that is going to buy you a lot of time, but eventually inevitably be,
Cracked.
Right, cracked. Or you go for the extreme and go, oh, they're probably going to go with dive. Let's really commit towards an anti-dive type of comp. It's really kind of paper, rock, scissors. So triple DPS is, in my opinion, often too hit or miss in a LAN situation. So in order to remedy that, you know, we would want to find a little bit more of a middle ground instead of going full out triple DPS. There are still some maps that, you know, arguably having triple DPS dive comp would be better. Mostly, say, Numbani right at the moment. A lot of teams are finding Fire Mercy to be a really strong opening. But answering the second question, having a more stable tank-based comp with a reliable player on Zarya would, in my opinion, help the team out a lot, especially a team like Cloud9.
Okay.
More consistency. Better transitions into, you know, after first point, you know, moving on to second and third point. Eventually you need to close out the game. You probably want to have some tank presence instead of just going out triple DPS, because a lot of the time you're killing people, but people keep on trickling in. A lot of times we found it really hard to close out a game, say on 2CP maps, especially when the respawn is so close to the point. People just keep on coming in, contesting the point. In order to prevent that from happening, you want to have a strong closing comp, and triple DPS just isn't that.
All right, Monty, based on the recent games you've seen in Apex, what do you think of his statement here, his theory for Cloud9?
I agree with the consistency issues that you can have when you're running triple DPS compositions, because picks can be absolutely brutal, and because a lot of these heroes have such low HP, if you get hooked by like a Roadhog and it turns into like a 5v6 where you have 2 DPS and 2 tanks, it's easy to get rolled on some of these points, because the picks will just keep coming. You just don't have the collective HP pool between the 6 heroes to really make it work. So it can be spectacular if you're outplaying people, but I wouldn't say that it's necessarily the safest or most reliable. So I do think there's validity to the switch if they think they couldn't push triple DPS to the next level, which I think would be challenging for them to do. So it's interesting to hear that they're going more towards a standard, more, I guess, conservative style of play, but it does make sense from a consistency point of view. I think there's a reason why we do see 2 tanks on the vast majority of teams, and that's because it produces the most consistent results.
The way you phrased it, though, Bishop, where it was like you were trying to convince them, like there was all these, it's almost you could almost hear the obstacles within what you were saying.
Okay.
If with the team that you have, wouldn't they naturally prefer to just play the DPS style? You'd think with those players, they'd want to just play like, oh, I want to have high impact, like I don't want to have to play a tank style. Like, has it been difficult to change the mentality in that sense, crack the paradigm?
Oh, it wasn't hard at all. You show VOD results. You go over, you do VOD sessions with the team. You point out not so much mistakes, but scenarios where the team could have performed better. And the players, eventually everyone starts getting convinced just by looking at the VODs. You just show them the logic, show them what's going on, and yeah.
Because you know, Monty, you know, back when you used to be a coach, like obviously that was the early days of coaching in League of Legends. You know, the setup wasn't that advanced. People just talked over Skype and looked at VODs and stuff. But I actually always wanted to tell you this famous technique that Phil Jackson, the legendary basketball coach, used to use. And one of the things he would do is, instead of doing like, you know, you watch the game back over and you say, look at that point there, and you explain to them, you know, like you messed up in this way, this way, this way. What he would do is he would do that after the fact, but what he'd do is he'd cut together the game tape and they'd sit there watching it. And when someone made a play where, you know, like they missed a pass completely and threw it in the stands, or they messed up a defensive assignment and that guy's the one who got, you know, got a free layup or something, he would just cut into the game tape like a scene from a movie where someone just like slit their own throat or something, or like someone was just on fire or something. Just to, like,
really?
Yeah, just to mentally make the association for them that like this is what you're doing right now. Like it's pretty good, right? That's pretty good. I think for Westerners that would work. That's pretty solid, I think.
It's pretty funny. I like it. I didn't know he used to do that. That's great.
That's good, right? Yeah, it's pretty good. So okay, so to wrap up Group B, the last
I did use an analogy actually with my players,
right?
From a movie. What's that movie? You, Me, and Everyone We Know. Are you familiar with the phrase "pooping back and forth forever"?
I'm not familiar with that phrase or that movie or this concept.
Pooping back and forth forever. So it's a very lewd emote that they invent from this movie, where basically people are like shitting back and forth at each other. And I used to use the phrase. I used to send them links to the scene from this movie where this kid is describing this concept, and whenever they would start like slow down their macro game and they would just randomly walk around the map not knowing what to do, I used to refer to it as pooping back and forth forever and send them the emoticon. So
when they're kind of like indecisive and they're just hesitating.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Baron dancing for no reason.
So I wanted to know then, because the one team we haven't, I mean, I say the one team, we obviously haven't talked about Afreeca Red, because there's no such team actually. That doesn't exist. That's just, I think that was like a walkover for everyone or something. So the other team in Group B was Misfits. Now, Misfits was a team where, obviously, friends of the show, people had high expectations for them, people thought they were going to do very well. What do we actually make ultimately of what happened to Misfits?
I think they improved really dramatically, actually. I think it's very hard to beat Lunatic-Hai. I think they came in an absolutely brutal group. And the fact that they reinforce, actually, I would encourage people to go. Thor, did you look at it? Did you see his blog post?
I saw some of it, yeah.
He's a former journalist, and he's a very good writer, especially considering that it's not even his native language. So it's quite impressive. But Reinforced wrote a really nice, lengthy blog post explaining their time in Korea and how they made the most of it, their thoughts on the group, his thoughts on the tournament. It's really well written, so I'd go hear it in his own words if you guys want to go take a look at that. It's on his Twitter, it's on my Twitter.
Was there anything enlightening that you found in that you think actually links in?
No, I knew a lot about it because obviously I've been talking to the teams while I was here, but it's nice to see him be so transparent. They were definitely, I think, practicing a lot more than any of the other teams that were here. They were working out all of their role swap issues because, remember, this was a team that had players in a wide variety of different positions and had to switch over. Guys like Nevix were previously playing a lot of DPS and now are playing Ana. So it was, I think, a tough time for them. And when they were in Europe, they really only had NIP to practice with, who only plays quad tank. So they were upset because when they came here, they felt like they were not prepared for the Korean play style, right? They were not prepared to deal with dive compositions with their new roster and their new roles, so they had to learn all about that because the style of play, like NIP is basically the furthest you can get away from the way that Koreans play Overwatch. Okay. So it's nice they had somebody to practice with in Europe, but the fact that it was
almost training them how not to beat Koreans.
Exactly. Exactly. So they were frustrated by that fact for sure, and reasonably so, I think. I think that as a team that they're only going to continue to improve. I think that their potential has been shown, and they have really demonstrated a pretty significant amount of growth throughout this season so far. So I was impressed, even though they lost 3-0. The games were relatively close. They showed a lot of upside. Against Afreeca Red, they were pretty damn solid. I think in any other group, they probably make it out of the group stage, which sort of sucks for them. Except for maybe Group A, but they might actually be better than Envy right now, given what we've seen from Envy recently.
Okay. Bishop, what is your take on Misfits?
Unlucky, unfortunate, in that they were placed in the groups like that. As far as the team performance-wise, I don't have much to say. It's just that perhaps if they had prepared better, they would have had a better chance of winning.
In what sense? How do you think they were ill-prepared?
They were ill-prepared in that I don't think they were really prepared for Lunatic-Hai. You look at the way they play, and you should be able to create a counter-comp to what
I think
they
that's
do.
easier said than done against Lunatic-Hai, frankly.
That is
because,
true.
yes, they do run one composition for the most part, but they execute it so well, and they have ways of outplaying you individually. When I was watching that match, it was Tvik was going off. He was killing a lot of the backline on the Pharah, but the problem is that while he was doing that, his front line was dying, and he couldn't get on the point. Right? It doesn't matter how many people you kill on Pharah if you're not actually on the point, flipping it in control. So the kills were relatively even, and what I noticed was that the kills are relatively even, but in developing their counter, Misfits seemed to forget that there was actually an objective that wasn't death matching a lot of the time. Because you can go even all you want, but if the payload isn't moving and the point isn't flipping, then you're not actually doing anything at all. You're still playing Lunatic-Hai's game at the end. And I think that was... They realized how to take out the members of Lunatic-Hai, but they didn't realize how to translate that into a real control over the objectives.
It's okay. When you say that, Bishop, like they should have had a counter comp, what do you think was the flaw in how they did attempt to approach it? Like, where was the disconnect, do you think? Could their approach have worked, put it that way, if they'd have just played it a little bit better?
They put in so much effort. Even the Korean casters were mentioning this. But maybe they just took the wrong approach, I feel. Again, I've been so busy focusing on Cloud9 that I couldn't really follow up on what exactly went wrong between Misfits and Lunatic-Hai, but I'd say that their approach was wrong in general.
Because I actually saw, by the way, if anyone really likes Apex, this is one of those threads that like you don't want to miss. Okay, there's a really good thread where someone transcribed, like not literally transcribed, but just like gave notes of what Monte Joon said, the ex-Lunatic-Hai player, in a stream, and he was commenting, and this is actually before the match, you know, he'd given some predictions that actually came true. He actually predicted like Athena would beat Envyus, Lunatic-Hai would beat Misfits, and then during it, like he gave comments on the reasons why. And what's interesting is after the match between Misfits and Lunatic-Hai, he had a comment I thought was quite interesting where it sounds like it was the other way around. It sounds like Lunatic-Hai were the ones who were prepped for Misfits, because he said that Who Are You had basically been told to mark Tvik. And by the way, mark is like, I don't know if they have this saying in America, but in football, it basically means you defend that person. Like that's your defensive assignment. He said that Who Are You essentially was told, like, anytime Tvik is on Pharah, right, you're just going to use Genji and that you're just going to kill that one person. And like, I don't know how much that had to do with the game. Obviously, that only works on a few maps, but it's certainly interesting
that's
that they had this kind of strategical approach.
It was, I think, actually ineffective from the side of Lunatic-Hai to believe that they were going to do that, because it worked when they were playing on Oasis, because there's the central pillar in some of the maps where Genji can get really high up by double jumping onto ledges or double jumping off of the pillar, and he can actually fight Pharah. But you can't really do that on Ilios due to the map architecture, which is something that I criticized during the game. That it's quite hard to make that same style of Genji play versus Pharah work on maps that are not Oasis, and I think that showed because there wasn't actually a lot of pressure against Tvik on his Pharah a lot of the time. I think if anything, I would have liked to have seen Tvik play more Pharah to see what exactly they would do, because Who Are You was switching between Roadhog and Genji pretty frequently, and I don't really think that they had the best answer, because Eska's aim was definitely not on point, and as long as Jaehong was actually pressured by Reinforce on the Winston, then I'm not exactly sure what they would have done, because Eska's aim was not looking too great in that particular match.
Okay. Because, I mean, there was a comment he actually said on that, which was that he claimed, Lita Jun said that he thought Eska didn't play as bad as people thought, because actually in his new role, in theory, in this lineup, contrasted to like the last season, that instead he's more like a support DPS, and his job was more just heal Who Are You when he comes back in, so he can keep going, initiating over and over again. Like, that's it. That's the logic that he can't get. Obviously, by the way, he could just be standing up for someone he thinks is a teammate. That could be it as well. Do you think there's anything to that? Anyone?
Bishop?
Bueller?
Well, it's interesting that he would say that Eska was placed in a support DPS role, because I felt like Ri Jae-hong was actually sacrificing a lot of his heals and just going, especially when there's a Pharah on the other team, to just completely give heals and just go hit scan onto the Pharah. And I think that's mainly why Tvik may have had problems. It was interesting to see Ri Jae-hong actually go on Zenyatta a couple of times, but yeah. Monte?
I don't think he was doing a good job of handling the Pharah, actually, because of the Misfits' game plan to camp him. And I don't think that Eska being some sort of weird defensive DPS is necessarily a great thing for that team. I don't think that Overwatch is a game where you necessarily want to have a strategy where one of your DPS players is playing bodyguard for your Ana player. I think that's really weird.
Their logic was like, yeah, that Eska somehow, his job is to protect Ri Jae-hong, and then he's the one who heals Who Are You. It's like, I don't really know what sort of like
I don't think that's
in place. It's quite advanced.
I think that's really strange.
This is all just mind games. I didn't even that guy.
I don't even think I saw that in the match, is what I'm saying, is that okay. I don't think that was true. I don't think that we saw, like I said, we saw, especially on the control map, a lot of time where Reinforce was on top of Jaehong killing him, and Tvik was just flying around on Pharah. So, not sure I saw that. I do think that Ana is probably the most reliable counter to Pharah in the game, because... Okay. It takes 3 shots to kill a Pharah, and you have, in scope, you have its hit scan, and there's no damage fall off. So it's not like, if you're far enough away on Pharah, and people talk about having, say, McCree or Soldier as Pharah counters, but the thing is, most Pharah players have learned to play the game from a million miles away, where the spread or the damage fall off really doesn't affect them. And it's very easy for their own Mercy or their own Ana just to heal them faster than those hit-can DPS can actually kill them. Unless you make a positional error and get up right in their face, right? If you're going to walk up or fly right over a soldier like an idiot, then you're going to die. But as long as you're very far away, and we've even seen players adjust their barrage ranges to be super far away when barraging, and it's very hard to kill them during that barrage. The only time you really approach is, do you have a Zarya bubble? Do you have a nano boost? And then you can get up in everybody's face. But so I do think that is the most effective way to deal with it, but I don't really think we were seeing Jaehong be successful in dealing with Tvik's Pharah, because Misfits realized what they were trying to do and then put pressure on the Ana, which I think was smart. So I don't necessarily think that they had the wrong game plan per se. I think that they're still just trying to gel as a team, and the coordination and level of understanding of how to run these dive compositions from Lunatic-Hai is so good. And then on top of that, you have the extra layer of, it's not just the teamwork, but the teamwork is there, but what really stands out is plays like we were talking about earlier, where Miro is jumping off the map to melee the Mercy in midair to kill her, and then jumping back on the map. It's these clutch, amazing plays that these guys are making that you can't account for, right? You, as a Mercy player, there is no way you think that you're not safe in that position from a Winston, right? It was just a fucking crazy good play. So how can you criticize the game plan when Miro's doing things on Winston that nobody thought was even possible? Or like, what? Who the fuck does that, honestly, if you're Miro? Who even takes that risk? That's crazy. But he pulled it off, right? So I think that it's sort of a disservice to the individual talent and playmaking abilities of some of the players on Lunatic-Hai. And we saw some great Genji play from Who Are You as well. And then, of course, Jaehong always has that amazing ability to live through dives to 1v1 tracers and Genjis that are trying to kill him. So it's partially that, but it's also just partially the exceptional, I think, individual skill of some of the members on specific heroes of Lunatic-Hai. Okay. And in a different meta, if Winston and Ana and Genji were all nerfed into the ground, I don't think this Lunatic-Hai would be as good. It just happens to be that they can play their signature heroes 80% of the time in games right now that makes them so terrifying.
Okay.
I would like to point out that Regeneron was actually I'm not sure if you followed him back when he was an early member. Back when Lunatic-Hai was relatively new in the Overwatch team, he was actually a Zarya player, and he would flex off to McCree every now and then. Once Ana came out, that's when he guys, I'm playing support. This champion is my champion. I'm just gonna play her. And they did a whole role swap in the team, and it's worked so far. So yeah, I completely agree with the comment that you made, Monte, that they wouldn't be as strong if those particular champions would have been nerfed.
Okay,
not to say that they wouldn't still be good, but I feel in a lot of ways that the way I'm thinking about Lunatic-Hai right now is the way that I think about Envy last season, where Envy at the exact right time got the exact right player. So we look at it and we say, okay, well, D.Va was hugely buffed, and they got Mickey. And Mickey was the perfect player for that meta. They could run D.Va double hit scan all day, every day, and that empowered them for a championship run because the meta was in their wheelhouse. And I think we're seeing that now with Lunatic-Hai as well, is, okay, well, they got some members who had to retire based on a scandal, but that combined with getting Who Are You, who is a great Genji player, in a meta that's very rewarding for Genji, in a time where losing Dean as their better Reinhardt player doesn't necessarily matter because you don't have to play Reinhardt if you're going to play dive compositions all the time, and you can have Winston with Miro. The question becomes, is this what we're going to see every tournament? I guess that's what worries me about Overwatch, is that some of these teams, more so than most other esports, appear to be empowered massively by specific patches.
Essentially, the worry here is that you'll have a bunch of good players, and the patch just decides who's better, rather than the player within the patch decides who's better.
I think a lot of this has to do with the limited amount of characters you can choose from in the game at the moment.
That's
and
fair.
Just how the balance is as well.
It does seem that in this patch, the balance is pretty good. We're seeing a pretty good, diverse lineup of heroes that are being played, and there's a lot of different and viable styles. We can look at Meta Athena and say this is a very different team than Lunatic-Hai. But I do get concerned a little bit, and I think that part of that, like you're saying, has to do with the fact that there isn't a large hero pool of heroes right now, and clearly, when we talk about things like team style, or as you would say, team color, if we had 5 more heroes in the game, or if we had 30 heroes, say 6 more, in a year or so, or year and a half, when there are 6 more heroes in the game, I think we're going to see a lot more differentiation in team color and team style, because the larger pool of heroes you have to select from, the more you can find your own niche, right, and your own specific strategies that work for you as a team. So maybe that's part of it too, for sure. And I think that's what I'm excited about. And people, I think when they look at Overwatch esports, see it on a very short timeline where not only the outcry over the current state of the esports scene, even though we know Overwatch League is coming at the end of this year, everything about Overwatch esports right now is still very new. And for me, I really enjoy being part of new scenes, but I also realize that this game really isn't going to hit its stride until like 2018, right? It's got a long way to go in terms of development from the game side, new game types, new maps, new heroes. And this happens with every game because it's released and the developers get a huge amount of data, right? From the casual players, from the professional scene, that they didn't have access to while they were developing the game. And it's that refinement, I think, that how developers refine what they initially release really defines what the esport is going to be. And I think that Blizzard has taken some very good approaches so far in terms of the way that they've developed competitive modes, having time bank instead of stopwatch for payload, for example. They are thinking about it deeply. And I'm excited for this game. It's fun now, but I really have a lot of hope for it, like in a couple of years' time. Okay. If that makes sense. And I think people expect a lot out of it, and we're still very much in the teething stages, the growing pains of this game as an esport, and maybe that's reflected somewhat in patch being seemingly so impactful for specific teams' level of dominance. Now, we can say the patch obviously affects every esport ever, but to greater or lesser degrees, and in my perception right now in Overwatch, it does seem to be pretty significant.
There's also another variable to throw in there, which is like, it's not even like here's the thing. If we wanted to really see the effects of the patch, then everyone should keep the same team for 9 months and we should see what happens when everyone plays three different patches. Everyone is also changing players every 2 months at the moment. So we've got to see how that, like, here's the thing. If they say one of these teams now, like, let's say it's Kongdoo Panthera or Lunatic-Hai or Luxury Watch Blue. Let's say one of these teams becomes the dominant team, right? And for the next 2 months, they can win everything. They're so good. If they then get completely crippled by the next patch and they go from number 1 just overnight to like number 8, number 9, then you'll have a pretty good case for it. The problem is if they keep changing players between the seasons and then the team that was pretty good but then also improved a player and then he got his best hero, it gets a little bit more tricky, to make like a really hard distinction.
And it's true. We have had literally 0 control variables because every team has basically changed their rosters. Yeah. They change it every 2-3 months. So what are you going to do?
Okay, so let's bleed this discussion into Group A here. So obviously the big surprise in Group A, and this is where actually I've got some more really interesting comments by Lunatic-Hai, but I'll get into it once we've got the initial discussion out of the way as food for thought. It's almost like he's a 4th guest here because he's obviously never going to be on the show because he was garbage and doesn't speak English. So there are those 2 factors to play with. So Monty, when we came into Apex, understandably so, I mean, there wasn't really anything to say about Meta Athena, right? Like, maybe they might be okay, but most of these are fairly unknown players. Like, no one could expect them to win like this.
No. The one thing that they did have going for them was they were on a 16-match best-of-5 winning streak. But keep in mind that is the Challenger League combined with the promotion matches. So it's not like we expected Meta Athena to do well, as well at least, once they got up. Were they exciting? Sure. But they also were playing sort of an outmoded meta. They were the quad tank team of Korea, while all the other teams in Korea were like, fuck this 4-tank bullshit. Meta Athena had their arms wide open, embracing the 4-tank setup.
I know you have arms wide open. So nice reference there. Your own favourite song. Okay, keep going, Monty. Little Easter egg for everyone there. So many insight. Keep going.
Just adding more citations to that lie. But I think what Meta Athena has done is that they have diversified nicely as the meta has changed. And Libero and Saya Player has been a great hit scan player, but Libero has been so diverse in terms of his hero pool. It's very rare you see a player play Diva and Hanzo as well as he does. because they're sort of on very opposite ends of the skill spectrum when it comes to this game. So I'm very intrigued by them. They have some solid strategy. Do you know what they're going to do with the nano boost every time? Sure you do. It's pretty obvious. It goes on Hoon. Hoon gets 1 million Graviton Surges. They play around Hoon's Graviton Surge. Now, I've said this before, but one of the things that I think they may be vulnerable to is aggressive dive compositions, because if you see them, Hoon plays very far forward also to get a lot of charge so that he can deal a lot of damage to get Graviton faster, whether he has Nano Boost or not. And I think that one of the things Meta Athena has to watch out for is that because Hoon plays very aggressively, that teams can basically just jump on their backline if they're good and destroy their supports and their DPS players who are in that backline pretty easily and just ignore Hoon to a certain degree. And the problem that I think Envy had is that Envy doesn't play dive comps, right? We look at their hero pools, and you think about the way you beat Meta Athena, which is in my own theoretical framework with a very good dive composition team. But Envy doesn't play Genji, and they don't play Tracer. And their Winston player is their Lucio player. And you need the Winston and the Lucio together so you can speed boost into their backline for a lot of these dive comps. So I think that this was a very bad stylistic matchup for Envy, where because of the way that Hoon plays and Meta Athena plays around him, they were constantly on the back foot when it comes to crowd control. And we definitely saw some suspect Zarya play from Mickey. Mickey has actually played Zarya very well in the past. I think he just had an off day. And that was a lot of the problem that we saw from Envy. But I'm not reading too much into this for Meta Athena. Yes, they won, but I think against a lot of the top Korean teams that are good at running dive compositions, they're going to have a lot more problems.
Okay, because an interesting detail... Oh, actually, yeah, Bishop, give me your thoughts first. What do you think of Meta Athena?
They have been showing a lot of promising results before Season 2 even started, and going on a side note here, I feel like a team like X6, Xenocide 6, who's actually performing extremely well in the Challenger team, are following up on what Meta kind of did.
Okay.
In the
Are you calling
sense
that? Are they going to come in Apex and be really good?
Yes, they will.
Okay.
Yeah, but, and also Rock's Orcas are also pretty damn good.
Yes, they are very strong as well, as expected. But what about Meta Athena? I feel like Monty's stealing everything I want to say here, because they have a strong Zarya player, and it was unfortunate for Envy because they don't really have a strong Genji or a strong Pharah. Either that or they haven't showed it yet. But
okay, well, put it this way then, Bishop. Let me frame it this way to get the insight from you, but on the same topic. Okay. If they go against Lunatic-Hai, for example, Lunatic-Hai will shut down the Zarya. True?
Shut down.
They'll ignore Zarya. They'll just ignore her.
So they would shut down her plays. They would shut down the team play style in a very effective way by diving the backline and forcing the Zarya to be out of position most of the time, simply because she doesn't have a lot of mobility.
Yeah, basically the problem with Hoon's play is that he'll walk up really far and he'll try and bust the front line, right? And he's going to ult the front line most of the time. And if you play a highly mobile composition, if he walks up that far and is trying to shield himself or is nano boosted, like you wait for the nano boost to come out, then you just fucking leave. You just jump out of his way and he just runs around in circles, the nano boost doing nothing. And he's not going to get that ult charge. So you basically just ignore the Zarya. If he's going to be, like Bishop's saying, because she's not mobile, if you walk up that far, then you have a hard time running back to where your DPS and supports are once the dive begins. Which is why you don't see very many Zarya players playing that far forward.
Like, put it this way, Bishop. Obviously, we can't just say that, like, if these teams can play the right counter comp, they're going to win. But if we put Athena against the Kongdoo teams, against Lunatic-Hai, against Electrobox Blue, these teams at least will be able to play the style potentially to beat them. that what you think? Or limit them or make them not as good?
No, the teams that you just mentioned, I believe they have enough versatility to just bring out a counter comp, and because they know how to win at this point. They've gone through so many games, they've had so many scrims with other teams that they know they know how to deal with every card, that hand that's dealt with them. Poker, yeah.
Yes, hands are dealt in poker. You're right.
I think the
analogy.
I think the weird thing about Envy too is that while they haven't been as impressive to me this season because of meta shifts and because they don't have the proper hero pools to necessarily execute the most diverse strats in this meta, what is interesting about Envy is they are actually better suited stylistically to play against strong dive comp teams than they are to play against meta Athena. Like if you bully their front line like we're seeing, and you play the style that Meta Athena does, they're going to lose because they simply have fewer crowd control ultimates because of how Meta Athena plays. Like for every one Zarya ult Envy gets, 2 are grabbed by Meta Athena, and they don't have the strategic versatility to counter that style. Whereas teams like Lunatic-Hai are well equipped to do that. But the difference is that Envy, when we've seen them play against dive compositions like BK Stars, what's great about them is that they can straight up, we'll see Taimu just 1v1 the Genji or the Tracer. These are very good Tracer players like Bunny. He'll win the 1v1, and then they'll destroy your entire team with long-range hit scan crossfire. So against dive compositions, Envy is actually a better team, but against the style of Meta Athena. So when we head into the quarterfinals, the nice thing for Envy, if you're an Envy fan, is they are not going to be most likely in the same group as Meta Athena, right?
Okay.
So they should stylistically, I think, do better against the rest of the Korean teams. So their kryptonite, I think, has been kind of removed, whereas Meta Athena probably is going to do worse.
Okay, because here's the thing. I'm channeling Lee Tae-jun again, that great mind for the game. So he said the reason why he was convinced that Meta Athena would beat Envyus was because apparently Rascal said something similar from Kongdoo, is that like the other really good Korean teams supposedly were wrecking Envyus in scrims all the time. Like Lee Tae-jun reckons Lunatic-Hai beat them like 90% of the time in scrims, and that like the lack of hero versatility meant like Envyus basically like they couldn't solve they didn't have an answer, you know. Bishop, hit me with some stuff before Monty says stuff.
I'm a slow talker. Once again, could you repeat what you said?
Okay, right. Basically, Lee Tae-jun, the summation is,
yes,
he said that Lunatic-Hai had beaten Envyus in like 90% of scrims that they'd played, and therefore he was quite convinced that Meta Athena would beat them as well. And that he thinks that, like, you know, the lack of hero versatility essentially means Envyus kind of don't have any options at the moment as to what to do. So we're kind of postulating, okay, forget the Meta Athena match right now. If we put Envyus against Lunatic-Hai, Kongdoo Panthera, you know, would they have a better chance against these teams than they did against Meta Athena?
I still think that their chances would be poor.
Okay.
This would have to do with the fact that Harry Hook is either going to be playing Soldier or Reaper. He's not really going to be playing anything else. His usual default is going to be Soldier. It doesn't work out, he's probably going to swap off to Reaper. Taimu's going to, if they're going to go for triple tank, probably play something like Roadhog. If it doesn't work and he feels like the team's in a really shitty spot, he may go for Hail Widow. Hopefully I'll get some picks. Let's do this. Other than that, they really don't have anything in store for them. They're kind of just relying on picks or just, you know, playing safely and breaking through luck somehow.
It's not through luck, it's through clutch plays. If you look at how they beat BK Stars when they switched to the Widowmaker, it's that they made incredible mechanical plays and clutched it out. It was a good strategic change to change to the Widowmaker at that time, and their positioning was good, but for the most part it was clutching. And clutching is not a reliable way to win any game ever.
I mean, it's like having a puncher's chance, right? You don't want to rely.
Yes.
That can't be your strategy to win. Knock someone out.
Like,
You know?
Now, is clutching the way that you win a championship? Sure. Like, it can be the difference between you and another very good team, and that a clutch play can win you a game or win you a title. But to get to the title, you have to have some sort of solid, consistent basis in order to get there. And I do agree that Envy has been lacking in that dimension this season.
Yeah, I guess luck was a bad choice of word there. But yeah, like I said, their champion pool is really unfavorable at the moment for this meta, and it's going to give Envyus a lot of problems. And Meta Athena was just the beginning, I think.
Okay.
I would disagree with Monte saying that if they played against any other team that they perform better, but I think that's simply not the case because they have such a small champion pool.
I think with their style, they would perform better. Would they win? No. I don't think they would win, but I do think that they would match up better. I think it would be a closer series, is what I'm saying. I don't think they're going to get 3-0'd by Lunatic-Hai. I think they at least take a map.
Okay.
Okay, so here's an interesting detail, is the way that Beom Joon described Meta Athena. So his analysis was, he said, they're a team that doesn't hesitate to waste time on planning strategies, which he meant by that they move around as a team, like they set up if they're going to do a flank and then all do it together.
They do weird attacks.
Yeah, it's the idea that they don't just kind of like haphazardly start something and then come together. It's like they're going to take all the time they need to set it up, then all go into it, and they're sort of in that sense going all in. Like if they fuck it up, they've wasted all that time. They've moved all the positionings all over the place. What did you think of this as an approach? Because obviously we're going to see this team going forwards in the competition.
As long as you make a well-coordinated approach into a fight, and the rest of the team commits to it without any variation, and it works, I think Meta's approach is correct and ideal. It's just that the game is so volatile and really fast-paced at the moment for teams to really pull off things like that. But ideally, if you could rewind time every time you make a mistake and just play a game perfectly, their approach would be the proper one to make.
I think that Meta Athena is sort of a worse version of Kongdoo Panthera when I look at their flank plays and their approaches. They have creative ideas. We've seen them do really weird attacks, like they were attacking through Cafe on Hollywood, which we never see anybody do, ever. But it was effective. But the thing to remember, when we see teams like Meta Athena, Luxury Watch Blue, Kongdoo Panthera, who like playing long flanks, and what do I mean by long flanks? I mean, they are going to stand in a line and crouch and sneak for a very long way around an objective to surprise somebody with a coordinated assault that they're not expecting. So obviously, this has the upside of being a surprise attack, being something that the enemy team is not expecting. But the downside is if it fails, you waste so much time trying to get into that position. And we do see from Meta Athena that sometimes when they've got like 5 people behind and one person's coming in for the front and it's supposed to be like a pincer attack, it's supposed to be coordinated, they're not as good at coordinating that attack as Kongdoo Panthera is. Kongdoo Panthera has been excellent at that this season, and we've seen some mistakes that have cost Meta Athena quite a bit of time. So I sort of view them as a weaker version of Kongdoo when it comes to that coordination. But yes, they do definitely go for a lot of unorthodox approaches to objectives.
To be fair, they probably did the Cafe approach because they saw Torp Sim, and it's arguably the strongest counter.
It was smart.
Yeah.
It was a good read. I'm not gonna argue with that, because the reason why you would do that is because there aren't going to be turrets that are covering the top of Cafe, because nobody puts turrets that would cover the top of Cafe. It was played really well, and I'm not trying to take away from that. It was a good strategic call from them, but it's also something that a lot of teams don't expect.
Fair.
Okay, Bishop, I've got a question for you now, okay? Because I can now tie this in. We've talked about all the top Korean teams so far. So here's the thing. When I saw those games, I made my tweet where I was like, okay, Koreans are finally warmed up in Overwatch, like it's ready for some destruction, basically, is kind of the implication, And Reinforce, obviously, like every player who's lost a match, was all over Twitter looking for any comments that could trigger him and possibly send him into a murderous rage / crippling existential depression. Because that's what pro players do in the West, by the way. Like, they search out things that could hurt them on a deep, deep level. So he actually just said a very vague comment. He just said something like, his gist was like, he'd like to just have like a discussion about this, which implies, by the way, that I'm wrong. Like, that's the way Westerners politely say that you're wrong. I'd like to have a real discussion about this, Like, he said he wanted to have a discussion, but he didn't have time to. And then obviously he made his blog post anyway. So it sounds like he doesn't buy the notion that like all these Korean teams really are like, they've kind of like staked their claim now, they're on top. Because to me, the problem is with all these results I saw, admittedly, obviously we still got the Cloud9 game to go and we've got the Fnatic game. But with all that said, put it this way, one or two of these Korean teams could end up not being that good. Maybe a Meta Athena doesn't look that good when they go in the next group. Or maybe Onsia suddenly can't match up against the Lunatic Blue. Who knows, right? But when you've got 5 teams like that have all had moments they looked really good, like, I'll go ahead and say 1 or 2 of those are just way better than anyone in the West at the moment. And whoever it figures out to be, it looks like the start of where a gap could start to open. Is that too much to say, Blizzard? Have I gone too all in? Bishop, rather?
No, that's not going too far, and a lot of this has to do with, and I'm sure most of the people tuning in on this talk show is aware that Korean teams are, in general, more disciplined than
at least at this point in their lives. At least at this point in their lives,
yes,
as we discussed earlier. Okay, so yeah,
there's just a lot of factors. Like, you're going to the army soon. As a professional gamer right now, you want to really hit bank and squeeze out as much as you can from the limited amount of time that you have before you're forced to go to the army and give up 21 months, like close to 2 years of your life. So,
or you've already been to the army like you do, and the army tends to teach you discipline. That is one thing that armies are good at, right? So you come back out. Would you say that your experience in the army, having been there and then being a pro gamer, was helpful?
It definitely was helpful, and it's probably one of the main factors why I was placed as team captain of Panthera for a while. But at that point, I guess there were other things that kind of made me decide that I'd rather coach for Western teams.
Yeah, white women are pretty cool, I agree, yeah. It's always been the law, Monty. I put it out there a long time ago, mate. The pizza, I believe, was ironically, mate, the irony of that was my actual terminology I used like 2 years ago on Somebody Insight, that Koreans really love pizza. Like, I can't really use that terminology anymore. Political things have happened since, Monty. I'm just going back to saying it's actually women at this point in time. Delicious women, okay? Because I don't ever want to be put in front of some sort of a judge and asked what that code word meant. No, it just meant women, okay? So come on, Bishop. Yeah, there was other things that sort of other goals, other challenges that you wanted to conquer.
Yeah, I really wanted to see Western teams, perform better. And
okay. You're actually an altruistic person. You thought, right, I've had my time as a pro player. It's time to do charity work. Like, I'm going to go over to the West. I'm going to nurse this broken little bird that is Cloud9. I'm going to fix its wing, and it will fly again. And it will escape the hawk that is Lunatic-Hai. It won't be killed. It will escape that, and it will fly and soar like a majestic eagle.
If you want to put it that way, yeah.
Okay, apparently that's right. Okay, fair enough. You can disagree and tell me, no, you thought they were a really good team. There was a lot of potential there. They kept stacking up greenbacks higher and higher.
The Korean teams, while they do have like a lot of discipline and whatnot, it's the environment really isn't that enjoyable.
Okay.
A lot of it's oppressive because you're just forced to grind out the game as much as you can, not allowed to play any other type of games. And you're held by contract.
Is that really a reason that was in your mind, that you couldn't play other games? You were like, oh shit, Dark Souls is coming out. I've got to get on this Korean team.
I want to play Warcraft, please. I can't play this.
Okay.
Like, a lot of that was, pretty upsetting, but then I accepted it because I was being paid.
Is the pay a lot better in the West than in Korea?
That's substantially better.
Okay.
By miles. The players in the West are probably paid a lot more. But let's see. I feel like with more creativity, with a lighter atmosphere where players are actually driven to play the game because it's fun, because they want to be with their other teammates. In the long run, I feel like those teams would perform more than the teams that are forced to play with each other, forced to play the game and just grind it out. I want to see that idea. I want to see that philosophy come to reality. Yeah.
Okay. Pause 1 second.
Okay.
The way you described that there. So the Korean teams are sort of forced to play together. Like, so for example, if a player doesn't really like it in his situation, he just has to keep playing. You can't think, right, well, I'll go to that team next season.
Could you rephrase your question?
It sounded from the phrasing as though if you're a player in one of those Korean teams, to some degree, you're just forced to play in that team. Like, if you want to be a pro, you just stay in that team, you keep playing, try and do your job, you know. Whereas, like, like for example, if we use Monty's example of Retry, if he really doesn't like how it's working out at the moment, then next season he could just be like, you know, if he was a Westerner, okay, I decide I'm going to go and play for a different team that's much better. Is that not really the thinking that's going on in Korea, you think?
Oh, no, it's far from that because most of the management has the power over the players to do those kind of decisions. Players really don't have much of a choice in Korea at the moment.
In terms of their teammates, you mean?
Yes.
Or just leaving a team even. I mean, if you think about how many times, like, if you notice, all those coaches always try to put themselves in, like, the father role. So then it's like, you wouldn't leave your father, would you? Like, this is a family here. What do you mean you want to go and play for another team? You want to play for another family? It's like you could almost imagine using that terminology. Like you know, it's very easy to go to another job if you're like, listen, I've got better career opportunities. They're like, oh, you've got better family opportunities. You want to be with a different family. You don't love us anymore. Is that what you're saying? If people start using all like emotionally charged language, you have to go, whoa, shit, I'm not saying that. Exactly. Now go and tell your brother that we're playing at 6. Like, what's going on here, Bishop?
Most of it's going to be. They're mostly trapped, contractually bound, I guess.
Yeah, contractually bound. Yeah, bound is a different way of saying trapped in a way. But yeah, keep going.
Right, and most of the team, most of the players are relatively young, right? So they don't have a lot of experience
naive,
going into being. Yeah, so there's a lot of fear in not making the right choice. So what most players will do, in general, is just kind of stick it out.
Okay.
Which is why you don't see too many roster changes within the Korean scene right now. But yeah, the power is more towards the management, and whereas the power would be more towards the players, I'd say, for most Western teams.
But isn't that the way that more professional scenes operate? We don't look at the NBA and talk about how the players are controlling the teams. They have contracts that are bound to for a number of years, and it's up to the front office to decide who the best players to draft are, who the best players to sign in free agency are.
Yeah, but the difference there is actually in the NBA, true, the player, if his contract is still for many more years, can't actually leave, but they can put pressure through the press, through the team internally, like, I want to trade me, like, I'm not happy, you know. Whereas I get the sense that you can't do that if you're a Korean player. Like, you're probably going to get shit canned if you do that. And even worse, I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, but if you did that, not only might it ruin your time in that team, but maybe another team would hear that and be like, oh, let's not pick that guy.
Well, that happens in the NBA too. Because
sure, absolutely.
Players get reputations for being troublemakers or difficult in the locker room. So I think it's the same.
To some degree,
the same fallout can occur. Let's put it that way.
What do you think, Bishop?
Well, like I said, the players are really inexperienced in these kind of situations. They're really young. They're naive, if you will.
And they don't have agents. I think that's the biggest part.
Yeah, they're not represented.
We can say the same thing about some 18-year-old kid who is on his first season in the National Basketball League, but there are fucking adults there who have experience in the politics and the financial operations of the NBA in order to make those to be the smart guy, the experienced guy there for them, whereas that doesn't exist right now. Or weirdly, it sort of does exist because Kongdoo is actually taking on that role with a lot of the teams, serving as player agents. But if you are a Kongdoo player represented by Kongdoo, then that obviously creates some pretty interesting
guys,
problems.
Like I know you were worried about the way like the team's going, but it's okay. I've figured it all out. I've got a great transfer for you. You're going to go and play in the other Kongdoo team. Yeah, it's going to be great. Like you're going to love it over there. Like the team environment's very different. Like the house looks different from that side of the room. Like you got to take this new perspective. Anyway, I figured out a great deal for you. The transfer is going to be 0, and my commission obviously is going to be 10% of your salary, which I'm going to take from that. And love you guys basically. So. Anyone else has any problems, just come to me. I'm going to be here all week. I am your agent.
It's also weird that in other games, like Kongdoo, for example, represents a lot of League of Legends Korean players now. They started to take on more of that agency role. They've famously been helping SK Telecom with the Twitch streams and representing him through that. But it's strange that they are representing other teams while simultaneously being themselves a team in the same league. Not really sure how that is ethical or viable or allowed. But
after following a lot of Asian esports, they don't actually there's certain words don't exist. There's that joke where like Eskimos supposedly have like 1,000 words that mean snow. And obviously we only have one. It's like certain words just don't translate. You remember you famously said there was no Korean term for zoning. Like Seraph didn't understand what this team meant.
Yes.
Well, okay, there's like a translation that's never occurred from the West. Actually, they've never heard of this term called conflict of interest. Like that's called doing business. Actually, like obviously I'd control everything. How else am I going to rig the game to work for me?
Why would I do that business deal? I mean, he's my friend.
What else am I going to do? Let someone independent do the deal and then hope he gives me all what I want? Well, why wouldn't I just take it? Like, you don't understand, these concepts don't translate, Monty. This is not the world we live in, okay?
That's true. That's very true about Korea in particular.
Yeah.
That problem has gone all the way up to the presidency, as we see right now. So,
I mean, my favorite, Monty, was where CJ, in some sense, owned OGN, which was the channel that the league was showed on, had the 2 best teams in the league, was also like, I think one of their people was like a high up person in Kesper at the time, which is connected to the government, which is like, this is actually like some sort of mad cartel that you're running, but just in the open. Everyone knows about it. Like,
it would be like NBC in America owning, like having the NBC football team and then broadcasting the NBC football team playing another team on NBC and being expected to be unbiased, right? It's pretty weird.
It's pretty strange. But anyway, Bishop, you're out of that world now. You're into the Western world. You're in Cloud9, an org that has never been involved in any sort of shady backroom dealings and in any way politically use conflict of interest, screw other teams over, even potentially in terms of, like, let's say poaching, things like that. These are all terms that, like, you don't need to worry about these terms, mate. You're in the clear. You're safe. So, okay, I want to go back to where you were saying before. So you made it sound like you're on this mission, okay? You're on this grand mission to come to the West. And I know what's good is you are fully Korean, because even though like you speak good English, you're purposely picking your words so that they're always not as quite as harsh as they could be. So you didn't say, like, the reason I came to this team is, let's face it, they have good players, but as a team, they are shit, and they don't know how to play the game. So obviously, I can do the most here. I can do the most good. I can fix them. I can teach them. Instead, you were like, there's a lot of creativity can be exercised here. It's like it's a lot of opportunity, things we could, new perspectives and stuff. Like, was it a huge challenge to come to Cloud9?
Was it a huge challenge? Was that the question?
Yeah.
Yes. Was it?
No.
No,
it wasn't
so easy.
You're a masochist then. Okay. What do you mean? Obviously, it's a huge challenge. They've never fucking done anything on LAN. It's a massive challenge. What's your next challenge? Fucking. Okay. Come on.
He's gonna fix NRG. That's the next challenge.
Yeah, he's gonna fix NRG. Yeah, obviously.
Well, as much as it's me coaching a team, it's a big learning experience for me as well, because I've never really been officially a coach.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
having a lot of fun. Yeah.
That sounds challenging. So something about that word that's triggering you. Are we not allowed to call it a challenge when something hard is put before you that you must learn and overcome?
We're not allowed to call it a challenge, because once you call it a challenge, it's actually really difficult.
Oh, it's easy at the moment. It's a cakewalk right now. You should walk into Cloud9. Hey, guys, I know you all like playing like high impact. All play tanks. Stick together. And and basically just play consistently. Don't try and make hero plays. Okay, has anyone ever done this before? No show of hands, right? I'm just going to have to pick people to do this, okay? So, starting now, okay? Oh, and by the way, we just have to beat one of the best teams in the tournament in order to get out, otherwise we're all fucked, and I might be fired. I mean, not picked up on my trial. Okay. Reasonable. Well, that sounds easy, Bishop, so I think you can do it, mate. What's genius, Monty, is he even phrased it like this. He purposely phrased it so that if he doesn't succeed, it's not the team's fault even then. He's still learning as a coach, you know. He's experiencing a new thing in terms of coaching, and it was all worth it in the end anyway. Like, it's not about success and the numbers. That's the Korean world again.
Not to mention that he couched it as not a challenge. So he did both things simultaneously, Thorin. So it's not a challenge, meaning that it's the player's fault and not his fault if they fail, because it was easy for him. But
it's obvious what they should do.
but at the same time, he was the one who was learning. So, you know, it's not he made it so that nobody is at fault, and people can take either side of that argument, discussing their success or failure in the future. Impressive. Yeah. That's impressive doublespeak.
See, that's what you'll learn about Western teams, Bishop. Go and study a team called NRG, because everything was everyone else's fault all the time. Like, you have to. It's a very different mentality being in those teams, you know. So, yeah.
I get used to the fans taking every side of that story. If you don't like Seagull, then Seagull was the problem, and if you do like Seagull, then everybody else was the problem.
Someone's always the problem.
Someone always is, yeah. Well, the key thing, in reality, is there's usually more than one problem, and so by seeking one problem, you then shut down the ability to fix larger problems that are more than one person. That's usually the secret I've found, you know. Like, actually, I've always had a theory along those lines, a metagame concept, which is, except for really extreme cases where one player, like, has completely gone into a slump or just can't play like a current style that you have to, every time one player appears to be the problem, it never usually is that they are actually the overriding problem. They're basically just like the symptom of what the team problem is, and there's some team problem in how you run the team, the style or the concept, that is just meaning that they're the breaking point in the chain, you know. There's probably some other guy who also is a little bit off, and then someone else who's maybe the best. For example, a classic example in games I've followed is sometimes the weakest player looks really, really terrible when the star player, who still plays, let's say, like 80% of his normal level, can no longer play 100% of his normal level and be that spectacular that it makes up for the weaker player, you know. That's the concept that I think is often lost on fans, because obviously the easy thing to do is look who's doing the worst on the scoreboard, look who died the most, look who made the big blunder, and think, right, that guy's to blame. Whereas in some games, maybe that guy plays 90% the same, but his star player does all the things right, and they win the game, and no one even looks at that, you know.
It's interesting that you point that out, because a lot of that really applies to Overwatch at the moment. If you look at a game, see someone underperform, say like a tank or Reinhardt, it's really easy to just blame that single player. But if you really look into the specifics, you know, maybe he's not being cared for as much as he should be. Maybe he's not being given Zarya bubbles so that he can build his ult charge as he should be. It's easy to really look at Hoon and just say, wow, this guy's a beast Zarya player. But the only reason that he's able to do that is because his whole team really caters towards his playstyle.
He's got everything, right? Like, what other Zarya player has like the whole tank line working for him? Like, obviously Zunda doesn't. He does the opposite, right?
I'm trying to remember if I have seen in that last best of 5. I'm pretty sure I didn't see, when they played Envy, a nano boost go to somebody who was not Hoon.
No, he gets.
If so, right? There was maybe one or two. It wasn't very many. We'll just say 90+% of nano boosts go to Hoon, right?
And yeah, the point obviously is it's not like every other Zarya is doing that, because obviously if you go over and look at Zumba, he's first of all wears all the tanks, and then secondly he's not getting any of that shit. So it's a different world for some people. Silver Spoon Hoon. That's going to be my nickname for him. He's born in privilege. Doesn't know what it's like to fail. He thinks, it's just easy doing this. Hey, why don't you got Zarya's all just carry the whole fucking game? What's wrong with you guys? Why don't you just demand the team play all the tanks and just do everything you say? Just do it.
If it works. And
obviously, Bishop secretly trying to set up Cloud9 to be the new meta Athena. He's trying to copy that. That's going to be his approach to get in.
Is that how you convince Mendo to play the Zarya? You're like, okay, Mendo, I know you love playing the Tracer. You love being the young gun DPS star. You're just an 18-year-old kid, got a lot of ego. But here's what we're gonna do. We need you to play Zarya. And you're like, sit him down. You say, okay, but because you have to play Zarya, you're going to get all of the nano boots, okay? That's the compromise that we're going to make to turn you into the flex tank.
This is supposed to be a surprise for Tuesday. But, no, I'm just kidding. No, Mendo is actually surprisingly an extremely team-oriented player. Yes. So he was more than willing to pick up the mantle of playing Zarya. So, I mean, we'll see how everything turns out on Tuesday. But, yeah, no, there's no, like, convincing required.
For the record, I don't think that Mendo has that attitude at all. It was just a funny story.
Are you sure? Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure from talking to him.
Okay, I have one last question about Apex before we do some other topics, which is, what did you actually think, Monty, of MVP Infinity? Because this is a team where you look at the other teams in the group, the amount of points they picked up were quite surprising, right?
It was, but I think there were other factors that led them to that, including Envy being very rusty in that first match. I think they're all right, but I think one fact in Easy Bro showed that they've got some. Their DPS duo is probably the strong point of that particular roster, but they also did lose pretty badly to BK Stars at the end. I just haven't seen that much consistency. I think that this is a team that has some solid pieces, but may need some roster shuffles, or they're better players going to other teams in order to really shine.
Okay. So we've got some Western news we can go into, but first of all, I have one last question on the Korean topic primarily. To Bishop, this is the tough question for you, mate.
Okay.
So imagine tomorrow that all Korean teams were disbanded and that we were going to just start all over again, and I've given you control of a Korean team, right? And you're allowed you can pick any one player to start the new franchise with. Which Korean player do you pick to start the franchise with?
I was about to go yikes because I was thinking you'd ask, like, if you could build a team, which 6 players would you choose? But just one player?
Yeah, who would you like?
You're going to build a team. You're going to build a team around this player.
Lee Tae-jun.
Right. Why do you hate Lee Tae-jun so much? What is wrong with him?
It's just because you were bringing up so much Thorin. That's why.
Okay. What do you think of him, though? Actually, give me your perspective on him.
I don't know him enough to really give a solid.
Okay, that's a good answer. That's a very good, polite answer. That's a genius way to answer. I've never thought to do that. Like, even if I thought he sucked, I'd just be like, well, I guess he's a good guy and he really did try hard. Like, I never thought to say, I don't know the man. I do not recall. Like, it's going with like the Reagan defense now. So okay, so.
I mean, he was on DPS, then he swapped to Ana. I don't think there was enough time for me to really say if he was a solid player on either.
Genius. These dodges are just fucking unreal.
When he was on DPS, though, am I dodging too much? I really feel like I'm not dodging here, though.
Okay.
But going back to the original question.
Yes. Which player? Sadly, we already know now because of the political shit. That's just like muddied the water because you can't say Flower because then it's like, oh, really? You'd pick him, would you? You would start a team with him, would you? Now you have to be like...
I'm choosing one player that I'm going to build a team with. Ideally, this is going to be someone with a little bit of leadership that's going to help me, bring together a roster.
Okay. Who would that
Everything
be?
was reset. I would probably have to be Ryu Jae-hong.
Over everyone else in the whole scene?
Yes.
What qualities does he have that would make him stand out in that sense?
He is experienced in the esports scene. A lot of the Overwatch players currently have not had any other professional experience. If so, probably maybe some like League of Legends or other FPS backgrounds. But Ryu Jae-hong originally comes from Lunatic-Hai. He's been playing FPS games for 4+ years professionally, and he really has a good mindset about the game. His age also allows him to, take control and become that leader within a team, in a Korean team at least. And we all know that he's a solid player on his Ana. So for those reasons, I would choose him over all those other people.
Who would you pick, Monty? Presumably not him.
Why?
Monty's going to pick a superstar player, right?
No, I think Jae-hong is maybe the best player in the world, does he necessarily have the versatility to survive upcoming metas? Well, according to Bishop, he was playing different roles and playing them well, so perhaps. He also showed some pretty good Zenyatta play the other day. I personally would tend to lean towards his decision-making process, where he would pick an older player that has experience who is a leader. But I don't know enough about the Korean players. I don't know them well enough personally to say who that is. So I think Jae-Hong, if that's true, is certainly a solid pick. If you were, I think, to go the other direction right now and really think about where you want to go in terms of building a strong roster, because maybe you want to go for that star DPS player. Another example could be Rascal. Like, to go to the other extreme, this is a very young player, but with a huge potential, huge hero pool, huge skill ceiling, and maybe you build out a team that will coordinate well around him and his his versatility and his skill, which, to I think a certain degree, that's what's happening on Kongdoo Panthera currently, but we'll just take that as another extreme option on the other end of the spectrum.
Okay. Right. So there was some transfer news that I wanted to run by you guys. So the big one was obviously that Rogue officially announced that Nico has joined their team. And this is a move where, even though they've officially announced it now, supposedly, it was already done a while ago and he was playing in the team and all sorts. And so even though he's a player where it's not someone that people outside the French scene are really going to know very well.
No, I have no idea who this guy is.
It's someone I've heard quite a lot of hype around their team. Like, supposedly they're going to be super duper good, really good in scrims and all that. So obviously they're only playing online at the moment, so there is that to be said. What do you actually think, Monty? Because I remember when they did that split between Misfits and Fnatic and Rogue, I remember thinking, right, well, Misfits obviously has the better team to be good, like, instantly, the plug and play team. But obviously Rogue has a lot of talent in it.
I think that Rogue does have a lot of talent in it. They can be good. I don't know enough about Nico. I know he was a former TF2 player, and he was playing on Melty, but we never saw a lot of LAN play from him, or any LAN play as far as I know, here in Overwatch. So they must be confident in him. I'm curious. Basically, I'm just curious to see how it turns out. I think the most interesting thing is that he's going to be one of their DPS players, which is intriguing. Because they have a lot of strong DPS players already on the team. So I guess it's going to be Soon or AKM and him, I guess. Let me double check, because there was an interview actually with AKM. So keep talking. I'll quickly search through it and see if I can find where he said that. They've moved Wins off the flex role and onto Lucio, and they've put Nox on a tank role. So maybe Nico will play a flex tank role, I guess. That's a possibility. And the Nox will be their primary Reinhardt. So there have been some movement. And we're currently, by the way, guys, because a lot of people are going to be saying, well, what about the Alienware Monthly Melee? That's actually happening while we're recording this show, so I haven't seen them play yet at all, so it's hard for me to say. In fact, this might be a better topic for the next show after we have seen them play. Because a lot of the fans are going to have watched and seen how Rogue is doing already.
Okay, so apparently in this interview with AKM, he says, because they ask him about the fact that him and Soon have the overlapping hero pools. So if teams are going to run 2 or 3 DPS, how do they decide who gets which hero? And they actually said that AKM is the one that's not going to change his role, and that if necessary, Soon might.
Okay.
So that would obviously be interesting. Obviously, we'll have to see it in effect. Bishop, do you know anything about Rogue, these French guys?
No, I'd have to say that I haven't been following them.
All right. So I just looked at Rogue from the Alienware Monthly Melee that's being played literally right now, and it looks like Rogue has 3-0'd their group without dropping a map. And they were in a group with FaZe, Renegades, and Hammers. We don't typically talk about online cups because we don't think that they're very indicative, but that's an impressive start for sure, regardless.
Okay. Because this is actually where, if for anyone who doesn't... Because this is one of the problems. I mean, this ties into that whole issue of why there's a problem with the competitive Overwatch Reddit, which is not only do people in Overwatch currently not consume a lot of content, but as a result, some of the good content creators out there, it doesn't even get put on Reddit. Like, they actually rely on other content creators to put their stuff on Reddit. So, like, one of the people I first early noticed was that guy who actually is French, that Kirby guy, who also speaks very good English, by the way. And so he's actually just become the coach of, I forget which team it is. He became the coach of some team, not a big one. But he was the one who told me that he thinks that Rogue is going to be super good. And he had some really ominous line that he said, where he said, there's a lot of misunderstanding around the triple DPS dive comp going around. And I think Rogue, are going to show people how it's done tonight. So basically, I'm looking to see what content he comes up with next. Like, he's going to make a video about it or an article or something. Cool. And he's someone where at some point, I think in the future, we'll have him on the show. So maybe we'll save bank that topic until then. So, okay.
Interesting.
The one other move then I had was... Team Liquid is another NA team who haven't really managed to have a whole lot of success ultimately. Like, they were okay early on in the first lands. And it was announced that Minstrel, the Lucio player, has left the team. Monty, what do you think of Team Liquid? Because we talked about them at some points in the past. They're obviously a team that has a lot of like ex-pros from other games.
I've been disappointed in them. I've only casted one tournament that they were in, which was Vegas, and they didn't perform particularly well there. I'm not sure how to diagnose that situation. It did seem like Minstrel left of his own accord, and whether he'll go to another team or not, it's hard to tell with Liquid, because I feel like Liquid has been distracted from their Overwatch team, because I feel like their management has been very focused on their CSGO roster and especially their LoL roster, which has been doing surprisingly poorly, considering the amount of money they poured into it.
There's been a lot of fires in both those games.
Yes. So I actually think that this is a team that that Liquid management has not had time or the focus to really put into right now. And I think that because they are now owned by these very wealthy NBA people, that in the future we're going to see them actually... I think that what I'm trying to say is I think they have an Overwatch team now because they want to bid into Overwatch League and they're showing interest and they're supporting a team, but I don't think they're actually going to care about said team until Overwatch League starts, partially because there's not, frankly, a lot of reason to care. If you're Liquid, because you're looking at the long term, and secondly, because you have had so many giant fucking problems in Counter-Strike and LoL that there's no time to pay attention to this. Okay.
Right, in that case, I'm guessing Bishop doesn't really give a fuck about Team Liquid. He's too focused on Koreans right now. He's either playing the role of like a really amiable spy for Kongdoo Panthera to let them utterly destroy Cloud9, or he's doing his damnedest to betray his national pride, to defeat one of the best Korean teams with a Cloud9 team that's probably not going to go that far in the competition. So either way, whatever he's doing is in some sense, it's admirable, it's challenging, and it's potentially unethical. So on that note, that's the end of the show, Bishop. Goodbye.
Thank you.
No, it's over.